Brought to you by Penguin.
Berlin Game by Len Deighton. Read by James Lely.
Chapter 1. "How long have we been sitting here?" I said. I picked up the field glasses and studied the bored young American soldier in his glass-sided box. "Nearly a quarter of a century," said Werner Volkmann. His arms were resting on the steering wheel, and his head was slumped on them. "That GI wasn't even born when we first sat here, waiting for the dogs to bark." Barking dogs, in their compound behind the remains of the Hotel Adlon, were usually the first sign of something happening on the other side. The dogs sensed any unusual happenings long before the handlers came to get them. That's why we kept the window open. That's why we were frozen nearly to death. That American soldier wasn't born. The spy thriller he's reading wasn't written, and we both thought the wall would be demolished within a few days. We were stupid kids, but it was better then, wasn't it, Bernie? "It's always better when you're young, Werner," I said. This side of Checkpoint Charlie had not changed. There never was much there, just one small hut and some signs warning you about leaving the western sector. But the East German side had grown far more elaborate. Walls and fences, gates and barriers, endless white lines to mark out the traffic lanes. Most recently, they'd built a huge walled compound where the tourist buses were searched and tapped and scrutinized by gloomy men who pushed wheeled mirrors under every vehicle, lest one of their fellow countrymen was clinging there. The checkpoint is never silent. The great concentration of lights that illuminate the East German side produces a steady hum like a field of insects on a hot summer's day. Werner raised his head from his arms and shifted his weight. We both had sponge rubber cushions under us. That was one thing we'd learned in a quarter of a century. That, and taping the door switch so that the interior light didn't come on every time the car door opened. "I wish I knew how long Zena will stay in Munich," said Werner. "Can't stand Munich," I told him. "Can't stand those bloody Bavarians, to tell you the truth." "I was only there once," said Werner. "It was a rush job for the Americans. One of our people was badly beaten and the local cops were no help at all." Even Werner's English was spoken with the strong Berlin accent that I'd known since we were at school. Now, Werner Volkmann was 40 years old, thick-set with black, bushy hair, black moustache, and sleepy eyes that made it possible to mistake him for one of Berlin's Turkish population. He wiped a spy-hole of clear glass in the windscreen so that he could see into the glare of fluorescent lighting. Beyond the silhouette of Checkpoint Charlie, Friedrichstrasse in the east sector shone as bright as day. "No," he said. "I don't like Munich at all." The night before, Werner, after many drinks, had confided to me the story of his wife, Zena, running off with a man who drove a truck for the Coca-Cola Company. For the previous 3 nights, he'd provided me with a place on a lumpy sofa in his smart apartment in Dahlem, right on the edge of Grunewald. But sober, we kept up the pretense that his wife was visiting a relative. "There's something coming now," I said. Werner did not bother to move his head from where it rested on the seat back. "It's a tan-coloured Ford. It'll come through the checkpoint, park over there while the men inside have a coffee and hot dog, then they'll go back into the east sector just after midnight." I watched. As he'd predicted, it was a tan-coloured Ford, a panel truck, unmarked, with West Berlin registration. "We're in the place they usually park," said Werner. "They're Turks who have girlfriends in the east. The regulations say you have to be out before midnight. They go back there again after midnight." "They must be some girls," I said. "A handful of Westmarks goes a long way over there," said Werner. "You know that, Bernie." A police car with 2 cops in it cruised past very slowly. They recognized Werner's Audi, and one of the cops raised a hand in a weary salutation. After the police car moved away, I used my field glasses to see right through the barrier to where an East German border guard was stamping his feet to restore circulation. It was bitterly cold. Werner said, "Are you sure you'll cross here rather than at Bornholmerstrasse or Prinzenstrasse checkpoints?" "You've asked me that 4 times, Werner. Remember when we first started working for intelligence? Your dad was in charge then. Things are very different. You remember Mr. Gaunt, the fat man who could sing all those funny Berlin cabaret songs, betting me 50 marks it would never go up the wall, I mean. He must be getting old now. I was only 18 or 19, and 50 marks was a lot of money in those days." Silas Gaunt, that was. He'd been reading too many of those guidance reports from London, I said. For a time he convinced me you were wrong about everything, including the wall. "But you didn't make any bets," said Werner. He poured some black coffee from his thermos into a paper cup and passed it to me. "But I volunteered to go over there that night. They closed the sector boundaries." I was no brighter than old Silas. It was just that I didn't have 50 marks to spare for betting. The cab drivers were the first to know. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the radio cabs were complaining about the way they were being stopped and questioned each time they crossed. The dispatcher in the downtown taxi office told his drivers not to take anyone else across to the east sector, and then he phoned me to tell me about it. "And you stopped me from going," I said. "Your dad told me not to take you." "But you went over there, Werner, and old Silas went with you." So my father had prevented my going over there the night they sealed the sector. I didn't know until now. We went across about 4:30 that morning. There were Russian trucks and lots of soldiers dumping rolls of barbed wire outside the Charité hospital. We came back quite soon. Silas said the Americans would send in tanks and tear the wire down. Your dad said the same thing, didn't he? The people in Washington were too bloody frightened, Werner. The stupid bastards at the top thought the Ruskies were going to move this way and take over the western sector of the city. They were relieved to see a wall going up. "Maybe they know things we don't know," said Werner. "You're right," I said. "They know that the service is run by idiots. But the word is leaking out." Werner permitted himself a slight smile. "And then, about 6 in the morning, you heard the sound of the heavy trucks and construction cranes. Remember going on the back of my motorcycle to see them stringing the barbed wire across Potsdamer Platz? I knew it would happen eventually. It was the easiest 50 marks I ever earned. I can't think why Mr. Gaunt took my bet." "He was new to Berlin," I said. "He'd just finished a year at Oxford lecturing on political science and all that statistical bullshit the new kids start handing out the moment they arrive." "Maybe you should go and lecture there," said Werner, with just a trace of sarcasm. "You didn't go to university, did you, Bernie?" It was a rhetorical question. "Neither did I. But you've done well without it." I didn't answer, but Werner was in the mood to talk now. "Do you ever see Mr. Gaunt? What beautiful German he spoke. Not like yours and mine. Hochdeutsch. Beautiful." Werner, who seemed to be doing better than I was with his export loan business, looked at me, expecting a reply. "I married his niece," I said. "I forgot that old Silas Gaunt was related to Fiona. I hear she is very important in the department nowadays." "She's done well," I said. "But she works too hard. We don't have enough time together with the kids." "You must be making a pot of money," said Werner. "2 of you senior staff with you on field allowances? But Fiona has money of her own, doesn't she? Isn't her father some kind of tycoon? Couldn't he find a nice soft job for you in his office? Better than sitting out here freezing to death in a Berlin side street. "He's not going to come," I said, after watching the barrier descend again and the border guard go back into his hut. The windscreen had misted over again, so that the lights of the checkpoint became a fairyland of bright blobs. Werner didn't answer. I had not confided to him anything about what we were doing in his car at Checkpoint Charlie, with a tape recorder wired into the car battery and a mic taped behind the sun visor and a borrowed revolver making an uncomfortable bulge under my arm. After a few minutes, he reached forward and wiped a clear spot again. "The office doesn't know you're using me," he said. He was hoping like hell I'd say Berlin Station had forgiven him for his past failings. They wouldn't mind too much," I lied. "They have a long memory," complained Werner. "Give them time," I said. The truth was that Werner was on the computer as non-critical employment only, a classification that prevented anyone employing him at all. In this job, everything was critical. "They didn't okay me then," Werner said, suddenly guessing at the truth, that I'd come into town without even telling Berlin Station that I'd arrived. "What do you care?" I said. "You're making good money, aren't you?" "I could be useful to them, and the department could help me more. I told you all that." "I'll talk to the people in London," I said. "I'll see what I can do." Werner was unmoved by my promise. "They'll just refer it to the Berlin office, and you know what the answer will be." "Your wife," I said, "is she a Berliner?" "She's only 22, said Werner, wistfully. "The family was from East Prussia." He reached inside his coat as if searching for cigarettes, but he knew I wouldn't permit it. Cigarettes and lighters are too damn conspicuous after dark, and he closed his coat again. "You probably saw her photo on the sideboard. A small, very pretty girl with long black hair." "So that's her," I said, although in fact I'd not noticed the photo. At least I changed the subject. I didn't want Werner quizzing me about the office. He should have known better than that. Poor Werner. Why does the betrayed husband always cut such a ridiculous figure? Why isn't the unfaithful partner the comical one? It was all so unfair. No wonder Werner pretended his wife was visiting relatives. He was staring ahead, his big black eyebrows lowered as he concentrated on the checkpoint. I hope he wasn't trying to come through with forged papers. They put everything under the ultraviolet lights nowadays, and they change the markings every week. Even the Americans have given up using forged papers. It's suicide. I don't know anything about that, I told him. My job is just to pick him up and debrief him before the office sends him to wherever he has to go. Werner turned his head. The bushy black hair and dark skin made his white teeth flash like a toothpaste commercial. London wouldn't send you over here for that kind of circus, Bernie. For that kind of task, they send office boys, people like me. We'll go and get something to eat and drink, Werner, I said. Do you know some quiet restaurant where they have sausage and potatoes and good Berlin beer? I know just the place, Bernie. Straight up Friedrichstrasse, under the railway bridge at the S-Bahn station, and it's on the left, on the bank of the Spree. Weinrestaurant Ganymed. Very funny, I said. Between us and the Ganymed, there was a wall, machine guns, barbed wire, and 2 battalions of gun-toting bureaucrats. Turn this jalopy round. Let's get out of here. He switched on the ignition and started up. I'm happier with her away, he said. Who wants to have a woman waiting at home to ask you where you've been and why you're back so late? You're right, Werner, I said. She's too young for me. I should never have married her. He waited a moment while the heater cleared the glass a little. Try again tomorrow, then? No further contact, Werner. This was the last try for him. I'm going back to London tomorrow. I'll be sleeping in my own bed. Your wife, Fiona. She was nice to me. At that time when I had to work inside for a couple of months. I remember that, I said. Werner had been thrown out of a window by 2 East German agents he'd discovered in his apartment. His leg was broken in 3 places, and it took ages for him to recover fully. And you tell Mr. Gaunt I remember him. He's long ago retired, I know, but I suppose you still see him from time to time? You tell him, any time he wants another bet on what the Ivans are up to, he calls me up first. I'll see him next weekend, I said. I'll tell him that. Chapter 2. "Oh, I thought you must have missed the plane," said my wife, as she switched on the bedside light. She'd not yet got to sleep. Her long hair was hardly disarranged, and the frilly nightdress was not rumpled. She'd gone to bed early by the look of it. There was a lighted cigarette on the ashtray. She must have been lying there in the dark, smoking and thinking about her work. On the side table there were thick volumes from the office library and a thin blue Report from the Select Committee on Science and Technology, with notebook and pencil and the necessary supply of Benson and Hedges cigarettes, a considerable number of which were now only butts packed tightly in the big cut-glass ashtray she'd brought from the sitting room. She lived a different sort of life when I was away. Now it was like going into a different house and a different bedroom to a different woman. "Some bloody strike at the airport," I explained. There was a tumbler containing whiskey, balanced on the clock radio. I sipped it. The ice cubes had long since melted to make a warm, weak mixture. It was typical of her, to prepare a treat so carefully, with linen napkin, stirrer and some cheese straws, and then forget about it. "London Airport." She noticed her half-smoked cigarette and stubbed it out and waved away the smoke. "Where else do they go on strike every day?" I said irritably. There was nothing about it on the news. "Strikes are not news any more," I said. She obviously thought that I had not come directly from the airport, and her failure to commiserate with me over 3 wasted hours there did not improve my bad temper. "Did it go all right?" "Werner sends his best wishes. He told me that story about your Uncle Silas betting him 50 marks about the building of the wall." "Not again," said Fiona. "Is he ever going to forget that bloody bet?" "He likes you," I said. "He sent his best wishes." It wasn't exactly true, but I wanted her to like him as I did. "And his wife has left him." "Ugh, poor Werner," she said. Fiona was very beautiful, especially when she smiled that sort of smile that women save for men who have lost their woman. "Did she go off with another man?" "No," I said untruthfully. She couldn't stand Werner's endless affairs with other women. "Werner?" said my wife, and laughed. She didn't believe that Werner had affairs with lots of other women. I wondered how she could guess so correctly. Werner seemed an attractive sort of guy to my masculine eyes. I suppose I will never understand women. The trouble is that they understand me. They understand me too damned well. I took off my coat and put it on a hanger. "Don't put your overcoat in the wardrobe," said Fiona. "It needs cleaning. I'll take it in tomorrow." As casually as she could, she added, "I tried to get you at the Steigerberger Hotel. Then I tried the duty officer at Olympia, but no one knew where you were. Billy's throat was swollen. I thought it might be mumps." "I wasn't there," I said. "You asked the office to book you there. You said it's the best hotel in Berlin. You said I could leave a message there." "I stayed with Werner. He's got a spare room, now that his wife's gone." "And shared all those women of his?" said Fiona. She laughed again. "Is it all part of a plan to make me jealous?" I leaned over and kissed her. "I've missed you, darling. I really have." "Is Billy okay?" "Billy's fine. But that damned man at the garage gave me a bill for £60. "For what?" "Oh, he's written it all down. I told him you'd see about it." "But he let you have the car." "I had to collect Billy from school. He knew that before he did the service on it, so I shouted at him and he let me take it." "You're a wonderful wife," I said. I undressed and went into the bathroom to wash and to brush my teeth. "And it went well?" she called. I looked at myself in the long mirror. It was just as well that I was tall, for I was getting fatter, and that Berlin beer hadn't helped matters. "I did what I was told," I said, and finished brushing my teeth. "Not you, darling," said Fiona. I switched on the water pick, and above its chugging sound, I heard her add, "You never do what you're told. You know that." I went back into the bedroom. She'd combed her hair and smoothed the sheet on my side of the bed. She'd put my pyjamas on the pillow. They consisted of a plain red jacket and paisley-printed trousers. "Are these mine?" "The laundry didn't come back this week. I phoned them. The driver's ill. So, what can you say?" "I didn't check into the Berlin office at all, if that's what's eating you," I admitted. "They're all young kids in there, don't know their arse from a hole in the ground. I feel safer with one of the old-timers like Werner. Suppose something happened. Suppose there was trouble, and the duty officer didn't even know you were in Berlin. Can't you see how silly it is not to give them some sort of perfunctory call? I don't know any of those Olympia Stadion people anymore, darling. It's all changed since Frank Harrington took over. They're youngsters, kids with no field experience, and lots of theories from the training school." "But your man turned up?" "No." "You spent 3 days there for nothing?" "Yeah, I suppose I did." "They'll send you in to get him. You realise that, don't you?" I got into bed. "Nonsense. They'll use one of the West Berlin people." "It's the oldest trick in the book, darling. They send you over there to wait. For all you know, he wasn't even in contact. Now you'll go back and they'll report a failed contact, and you'll be the one they're sending to get him. My God, Bernie, you are a fool at times." I hadn't looked at it like that. But there was more than a grain of truth in Fiona's cynical viewpoint. "Well, they can find someone else," I said angrily. "Let one of the local people go over there to get him. My face is too well known there. They'll say they're all kids without experience, just what you yourself said." "It's Brahms 4, I told her. Brahms. Those network names sound so ridiculous. I liked it better when they had code words like Trojan, Wellington, and Claret." The way she said it was annoying. "The post-war network names are specially chosen to have no identifiable nationality," I said. "And the number 4 man in the Brahms network once saved my life. He's the one who got me out of Weimar. He's the one who's kept so damn secret. Yes, I know. Why do you think they sent you? And now do you see why they're going to make you go in and get him?" Beside the bed, my photo stared back at me from its silver frame. Bernard Samson, a serious young man with baby face, wavy hair and horn-rimmed glasses, looked nothing like the wrinkled old fool I shaved every morning. I was in a spot. He could have kept going. He didn't have to come back all the way to Weimar. I settled into my pillow. How long ago was that? 18 years, maybe 20. "Go to sleep," said Fiona. "I'll phone the office in the morning and say you're not well. It'll give you time to think." You should see the pile of work on my desk. I took Billy and Sally to the Greek restaurant for his birthday. The waiters sang happy birthday and cheered him when he blew the candles out. It was sweet of them. I wish you'd been there. "I won't go. I'll tell the old man in the morning. Can't do that kind of thing anymore." And there was a phone call from Mr. Moore at the bank. "He wants to talk with you. He said there's no hurry." "We both know what that means," I said. "Means phone me back immediately or else." I was close to her now and I could smell perfume. Had she put it on just for me, I wondered. Harry Moore isn't like that. At Christmas we were nearly 700 overdrawn, and when we saw him at my sister's party he said not to worry. Brahms 4 took me to the house of a man named Busch, Karl Busch, who had this empty room in Weimar. It was all coming back to me. We stayed there 3 days, and afterwards Karl Busch went back there. They took Busch up to the security barracks in Leipzig. He was never seen again. "You're senior staff now, darling," she said sleepily. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to." "I phoned you last night," I said. "It was 2 o'clock in the morning, but there was no reply." "I was here, asleep," she said. She was awake and alert now, I could tell by the tone of her voice. "I let it ring for ages," I said. "I tried twice. Finally, I got the operator to dial it. Then it must be the damn phone acting up again. I tried to phone here for Nanny yesterday afternoon and there was no reply. I'll tell the engineers tomorrow." Chapter 3. Richard Cryer was the German station's controller, the man to whom I reported. He was younger than I was by 2 years, and his apologies for this fact gave him opportunities for reminding himself of his fast promotion, in a service that was not noted for its fast promotions. Dickie Cryer had curly hair, and liked to wear open-neck shirts and faded jeans, and be the wunderkind amongst all the dark suits and Eton ties. But under all the trendy jargon and casual airs, he was the most pompous stuffed shirt in the whole department. "They think it's a cushy number in here, Bernard," he said, while stirring his coffee. "They don't realise the way I have the Deputy Controller Europe breathing down my neck and endless meetings with every damned committee in the building." Even Cryer's complaints were contrived to show the world how important he was. But he smiled to let me know how well he endured his troubles. He had his coffee served in a fine spode china cup and saucer, and he stirred it with a silver spoon. On the mahogany tray there was another spode cup and saucer, a matching sugar bowl, and a silver creamer fashioned in the shape of a cow. It was a valuable antique. Dickie had told me that many times. And at night it was locked in the secure filing cabinet, together with the log and the current carbons of the mail. "They think it's all lunches at the Mirabelle and a fiend with the boss." Dickie always said fiend, rather than brandy or cognac. Fiona told me he'd been saying it ever since he was president of the Oxford University Food and Wine Society as an undergraduate. Dickie's image as a gourmet was not easy to reconcile with his figure, for he was a thin man, with thin arms, thin legs, and thin, bony hands and fingers, with one of which he continually touched his thin, bloodless lips. It was a nervous gesture provoked, said some people, by the hostility around him. This was nonsense, of course, but I did dislike the little creep. I will admit that. He sipped his coffee, and then tasted it carefully, moving his lips while staring at me as if I might have come to sell him the year's crop. "It's just a shade bitter, don't you think, Bernard?" "Nescafe all tastes the same to me," I said. "This is pure chaga, ground just before it was brewed." He said it calmly, but nodded to acknowledge my little attempt to annoy him. "Well, he didn't turn up," I said. "We can sit here drinking chaga all morning and it won't bring Brahms 4 over the wire." Dickie said nothing. "Has he re-established contact yet?" I asked. Dickie put his coffee on the desk while he riffled some papers in a file. "Yes, we received a routine report from him. He's safe." Dickie chewed a fingernail. "Why didn't he turn up?" "No details on that one." He smiled. He was handsome in the way that foreigners think bowler-hatted English stockbrokers are handsome. His face was hard and bony, and the tan from his Christmas in the Bahamas had still not faded. "He'll explain that in his own good time. Don't badger the field agents. That's always been my policy. Right, Bernard?" "That's the only way, Dickie." "Ye gods! How I'd love to get back into the field just once more. Oh, you people have the best of it." "I've been off the field list for nearly 5 years, Dickie. I'm a desk man now, like you." "Like you've always been is what I should have said. But I let it go." Captain Cryer, he'd called himself when he returned from the army. But he soon realised how ridiculous that title sounded to a Director-General who'd worn a general's uniform. And he realised, too, that Captain Cryer would be an unlikely candidate for that illustrious post. He stood up, smoothed his shirt, and then sipped coffee, holding his free hand under the cup to guard against drips. He noticed that I hadn't drunk my chagga. "Would you prefer tea?" "Is it too early for a gin and tonic?" He didn't respond to this question. "I think you feel beholden to our friend B4. You still feel grateful about his coming back to Weimar for you." He greeted my look of surprise with a knowing nod. "I read the files, Bernard. I know what's what." "It was a decent thing to do," I said. "It was," said Dickie. "It was a truly decent thing to do. But that wasn't why he did it. Not only that." "You weren't there, Dickie." "B4 panicked, Bernard. He fled. He was near the border, at some godforsaken little place in Thuringewald by the time our people intercepted him and told him he wasn't wanted for questioning by the KGB, or anyone else for that matter. It's ancient history," I said. "We turned him round," said Cryer. It had become we, I noticed. "We gave him some chicken feed and told him to go back and play the outraged innocent. We told him to cooperate with them." Chicken feed. I had names of people who'd already escaped, safe houses long since abandoned, bits and pieces that would make Brahms 4 look good to the KGB. But they got Bush, the man who was sheltering me. Unhurriedly, Cryer finished his coffee and wiped his lips with the linen napkin from the tray. "We got 2 of you out. I'd say that's not bad for that sort of crisis, 2 out of 3. Bush went back to his house to get his stamp collection." "Stamp collection? What can you do with a man like that?" "They put him in the bag, of course." "The stamp collection was probably his life savings," I said. "Well, perhaps it was, but that's how they put him in the bag, Bernard. No second chances with those swine. I know that, you know that, and he knew it too." "So that's why our field people don't like Brahms 4? "Yes. That's why they don't like him. They think he informed on the Erfurt network." Cryer shrugged. "What could we do? We could hardly spread the word that we'd invented that story to make the fellow persona grata with the KGB." Cryer walked across to his drinks cabinet and poured some gin into a large Waterford glass tumbler. "Plenty of gin, not too much tonic," I said. Cryer turned to stare blankly at me. "If that's for me," I added. So there had been a blunder. They'd told Brahms 4 to reveal old Bush's address, and the poor old sod had gone back for his stamps and run into the arms of a KGB arrest squad. Dickie put a little more gin into the glass and added ice cubes gently so that they would not splash. He brought it, together with a small bottle of tonic, which I left unused. "There's no need for you to concern yourself with this one any more, Bernard. You did your bit in going to Berlin. We'll let one of the others take over now." "Is he in trouble?" Cryer went back to the drinks cabinet and busied himself tidying away the bottle caps and stirrer. Then he closed the cabinet doors and said, "Do you know the sort of material Brahms 4's been supplying?" Economics intelligence. He works for an East German bank." "He's the most carefully protected source we have in Germany. And you are one of the few people ever to have seen him face to face." "And that was almost 20 years ago." "He works through the mail, always local addresses to avoid the censors and the security, posting his material to various members of the Brahms net. In emergencies, he uses a dead letter drop, but that's all. No microdots, no one-time pads, no codes, no microtransmitters, no secret ink. Very old-fashioned. And very safe," I said. "Very old-fashioned and very safe so far," agreed Dickie. "Even I don't have access to the Brahms 4 file. No one knows anything about him except that he's been getting material from somewhere at the top of the tree. All we can do is guess." "And you've guessed?" I prompted him, knowing that Dickie was going to tell me anyway. "From B4, we are getting important decisions of the Deutsche Investitionsbank and from the Deutsche Bauernbank. Those state banks provide long-term credit for industry and for agriculture, Both banks are controlled by the Deutsche Notenbank, through which come all remittances, payments, and clearing for the whole country. Now and again, we get good notice of what the Moscow Narodny Bank is doing, and regular reports about the Comic-Con briefings. I think Brahms 4 is a secretary or personal assistant to one of the directors of the Deutsche Notenbank. Or a director. All banks have an economics intelligence department. Being head of that department's not a job an ambitious banker craves for, so they get switched around. Brahms 4 has been feeding us this sort of thing too long to be anything but a clerk or assistant. You'll miss him. Too bad you have to pull him out, I said. Pull him out? Well, I'm not trying to pull him out. I want him to stay right where he is. I thought it was his idea that he should come over to the West, not mine. I want him to remain where he is. I can't afford to lose him. Is he getting frightened? They all get frightened eventually, said Cryer. It's battle fatigue. The strain of it all gets them down. They get older, and they get tired, and they start looking for that pot of gold and the country house with the roses round the door. They start looking for things we've been promising them for 20 years. That's the truth of it. Who knows what makes these crazy bastards do it, said Cryer. I've spent half my life trying to understand their motivation. He looked out of the window. Hard sunlight sidelighting the lime trees, dark blue sky with just a few smears of cirrus very high. And I'm still no nearer knowing what makes any of them tick. There comes a time when you have to let them go, I said. He touched his lips. Or was he kissing his fingertips, or maybe tasting the gin that he'd spilled on his fingers? Lord Moran's theory, you mean? I seem to remember he divided men into 4 classes. Those who were never afraid, those who were afraid but never showed it, those who were afraid and showed it but carried on with their job, and the 4th group, men who were afraid and shirked. Where does Brahms 4 fit in there? I don't know, I said. How the hell can you explain to a man like Cryer what it's like to be afraid, day and night, year after year? What had Cryer ever had to fear, beyond a close scrutiny of his expense accounts? Well, he's got to stay there for the time being, and there's an end to it. So, why was I sent to receive him? He was acting up, Bernard. He threw a little tantrum. You know the way these chaps can be at times. He threatened to walk out on us, but the crisis passed. Threatened to use an old forged US passport and march out through Checkpoint Charlie. So, I was there to hold him. Couldn't have a hue and cry, could we? Couldn't give his name to the civil police and send teleprinter messages to the boats and airports. He unlocked the window and strained to open it. It had been closed all winter, and now it took all Cryer's strength to unstick it. Whiff of London diesel. That's better, he said, as there came a movement of chilly air. But he's still proving difficult. He's not giving us the regular flow of information. He threatens to stop altogether. And you? What are you threatening? Threats are not my style, Bernard. I'm simply asking him to stay there for 2 more years and help us get someone else into place. Ye gods! Do you know how much money he's squeezed out of us over the past 5 years? As long as you don't want me to go, I said. My face is too well known over there, and I'm getting too bloody short-winded for any strong-arm stuff. Oh, we've plenty of people available, Bernard. No need for senior staff to take risks. And anyway, if things went really sour on us, we'd need someone from Frankfurt. That has a nasty ring to it, Dickie. What kind of someone would we need from Frankfurt? Cryer sniffed. No need to draw your diagram, old man. If B4 really started thinking of spilling the beans to the Norman and Strasser boys, we'd have to move fast. Expedient demise, I said, keeping my voice level and my face expressionless. Cryer became a fraction uncomfortable. We'd have to move fast. We'd have to do whatever the team on the spot thought necessary. You know how these things go. and XPD can never be ruled out. This is one of our own people, Dickie. This is an old man who has served the department for over 20 years, and all we're asking, said Cryer with exaggerated patience, is for him to go on serving us in the same way. What happens if he goes off his head and wants to betray us is conjecture. Pointless conjecture. We earn our living from conjecture, I said. And it makes me wonder what I would have to do to have someone from Frankfurt come along to get me ready for that big debriefing in the sky. Cryer laughed. "Ha! You always were a card," he said. "You wait until I tell the old man that one. Any more of that delicious gin?" He took the glass from my outstretched hand. "Leave Brahmsford, Frank Harrington and the Berlin Field Unit, Bernard. You're not a German, you're not a field agent any longer, and you are far, far too old." He put a little gin in my glass and added ice, using claw-shaped silver tongs. "Let's talk about something more cheerful," he said, over his shoulder. "In that case, Dickie, what about my new car allowance? The cashier won't do anything without the paperwork." "Oh, leave it to my secretary. I've filled in the forms already," I told him. "I've got them with me, as a matter of fact. They just need your signature. 2 copies. I placed them on the corner of his desk and gave him the pen from his ornate desk set. "This car will be too big for you," he muttered, while pretending the pen was not marking properly. "You'll be sorry you didn't opt for something more compact." I gave him my plastic ballpoint, and after he'd signed, I looked at the signature before putting the forms in my pocket. It was perfect timing, I suppose. Chapter 4. We'd arranged to visit Fiona's Uncle Silas for the weekend. Old Silas Gaunt was not really her uncle. He was a distant relative of her mother's. She'd never even met Silas until I took her to see him when I was trying to impress her, just after we'd first met. She'd come down from Oxford, with all the expected brilliant results in philosophy, politics and economics, or modern greats in the jargon of academe, and done all those things that her contemporaries thought smart. She'd studied Russian at the Sorbonne, while perfecting the French accent necessary for upper-class young English women. She'd done a short cookery course at the Cordon Bleu, worked for an art dealer, crewed for a transatlantic yacht race, and written speeches for a man who'd narrowly failed to become a Liberal Member of Parliament. It was soon after that fiasco that I met her. Old Silas had been captivated by his newly discovered niece right from the start. We saw a lot of him, and my son Billy was his godchild. Silas Gaunt was a formidable figure, who'd worked for intelligence back in the days when such service was really secret. Back in the days when reports were done in copperplate handwriting, and field agents were paid in sovereigns. When my father was running the Berlin Field Unit, Silas was his boss. "Oh, he's a silly little fart," said Fiona, when I related my conversation with Dickie Cryer. It was Saturday morning, and we were driving to Silas's farm in the Cotswold Hills. "He's a dangerous little fart," I said. "When I think of that idiot making decisions about field people." "About Brahms 4, you mean?" said Fiona. B4 is Dickie's latest contribution to the terminology. "Yes, people like that," I said. "I get the goddamned shivers." "He won't let the Brahms sauce go," she said. We were driving through Reading, having left the motorway in search of Elizabeth Arden's skin tonic. She was at the wheel of the red Porsche her father had bought her the previous birthday. She was 35, and her father said she needed something special to cheer her up. I wondered how he was planning to cheer me up for my 40th, coming in 2 weeks' time. I guessed it would be the usual bottle of Rémy Martin, and wondered if I'd again find inside the box the compliments card of some office supplies firm who'd given it to him. "The Economics Intelligence Committee lives off that banking stuff that Brahms 4 provides," she added, after a long silence thinking about it. "I still say we should have stayed on the motorway. That chemist in the village is sure to have skin tonic," I said. although in fact I hadn't the faintest idea what skin tonic was, except that it was something my skin had managed without for several decades. "But not Elizabeth Arden," said Fiona. We were in a traffic jam in the middle of Reading, and there was no chemist's shop in sight. The engine was overheating, and she switched it off for a moment. "Perhaps you're right," she admitted finally, leaning across to give me a brief kiss. She was just keeping me sweet, because I was going to be the one who leapt out of the car and dashed off with a damned jar of magic ointment, while she flirted with the traffic warden. "Have you got enough space in the back, children?" she asked. The kids were wedged each side of a suitcase, but they didn't complain. Sally grunted and carried on reading her William book, and Billy said, "How fast will you go on the motorway?" "And Dickie's on the committee too," I said. "Yes, he claims it was his idea." "I lose count of how many committees he's on. He's never in his bloody office when he's needed. His appointment book looks like the Good Food Guide. Lately he's discovered breakfast meetings. Now he gorges and guzzles all day. I don't know how he stays so thin." The traffic moved again, and she started up and followed closely behind a battered red double-decker bus. The conductor was standing on the platform, looking at her and at the car with undisguised admiration. She smiled at him, and he smiled back. It was ridiculous, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of jealousy. "I'll have to go," I said. "To Berlin?" "Dickie knows I'll have to go. The whole conversation was just Dickie's way of making sure I knew." "What difference can you make?" said Fiona. "Brahms can't be forced to go on. If he's determined to stop working for us, there's not much anyone in the department can do about it." "No?" I said. "Well, you might be surprised." She looked at me. "But Brahms 4 is old. He must be due for retirement." Dickie was making veiled threats. Bluff. "Probably bluff," I agreed. "Just Dickie's way of saying that if I stand back and let anyone else go, they might get too rough. But you can't be sure with Dickie, especially when his seniority is on the line." "You mustn't go, darling." "My being there is probably going to make no difference at all." "Well, then. But if someone else goes, some kid from the Berlin office, and something bad happens, how will I ever be sure that I couldn't have made it come out okay?" "Even so, Bernard, I still don't want you to go." "We'll see," I said. "You owe Brahms 4 nothing," she said. "I owe him," I said. "I know that, and so does he. That's why he'll trust me in a way he'll trust no one else. He knows I owe him." "It must be 20 years, she said, as if promises, like mortgages, became less burdensome with time. "What's it matter how long ago it was?" "And what about what you owe me, and what you owe Billy and Sally?" "Don't get angry, sweetheart," I said. "It's hard enough already. You think I want to go over there and play Boy Scout again?" "I don't know," she said. She was angry, and when we got on the motorway she put her foot down so that the needles went right round the dials. We were at Uncle Silas's farm well before he'd even opened the champagne for pre-lunch drinks. Whitelands was a 600-acre farm in the Cotswolds, the great limestone plateau that divides the Thames Valley from the River Severn, and the farmhouse of ancient honey-coloured local stone with mullioned windows and lopsided doorway would have looked too perfect, like the set for a Hollywood film, except that summer had not yet come, and the sky was grey, the lawn brown, and the rose bushes trimmed back and bloomless. There were other cars parked carelessly alongside the huge stone barn, a horse tethered to the gate, and fresh clots of mud on the metal grating of the porch. The old oak door was unlocked, and Fiona pushed her way into the hall in that proprietorial way that was permitted to members of the family. There were coats hanging on the wall, and more draped over the settee. "Dickie and Daphne Cryer," said Fiona, recognising a mink coat. "And Brett Rensselaer," I said, touching a sleeve of soft camel hair. "Is it going to be all people from the office?" Fiona shrugged, and turned so that I could help her take off her coat. There were voices and decorous laughter from the back of the house. "Not all from the office," she said. "The Range Rover out front belongs to that retired general who lives in the village. His wife has the riding school. Remember? You hated her." "I wonder if the Criers are staying," I said. "Not if their coats are in the hall," said Fiona. "You should have been the detective," I said. She grimaced at me. It wasn't the sort of remark that Fiona regarded as a compliment. This region of England has the prettiest villages and most beautiful countryside in the world. And yet there is something about such contrived perfection that I find disquieting. For the cramped labourers' cottages are occupied by stockbrokers and building speculators, and ye host in ye olde village pub turns out to be an airline pilot between trips. The real villagers live near the main road in ugly brick terraced houses, their front gardens full of broken motor cars. "If you go down to the river, remember the bank is slippery with mud, and for goodness sake wipe your shoes carefully when you come in for lunch." The children responded with whoops of joy. "I wish we had somewhere like this to go at weekends," Fiona said to me. "We do have somewhere like this," I said. "We have this. Your Uncle Silas has said come as often as you like." "It's not the same," she said. "You're damn right it's not," I said. "If this was our place, you'd not be going down the hall for a glass of champagne before lunch. You'd be hurrying along to the kitchen to scrape the vegetables in cold water." "Fiona, my darling, and Bernard!" Silas Gaunt came from the kitchen. "I thought I recognized the children I just spotted climbing through the shrubbery." "I'm sorry," said Fiona, but Silas laughed and slapped me on the back. "We'll be eating very soon, but there's just time to gulp a glass of something. I think you know everyone. Some neighbours dropped in, but I haven't been able to get them to stay for lunch." Silas Gaunt was a huge man, tall, with a big belly. He'd always been fat, but since his wife died he'd grown fatter in the way that only rich, old, self-indulgent men grow fat. He cared nothing about his waistline, or that his shirts were so tight the buttons were under constant strain, or about the heavy jowls that made him look like a worried bloodhound. His head was almost bald, and his forehead overhung his eyes in a way that set his features into a constant frown, which was only dispelled by his loud laughs, for which he threw his head back and opened his mouth at the ceiling. Uncle Silas presided over his luncheon party like a squire with his farm workers, but he gave no offence because it was so obviously a joke, just as his posture as a farmer was a joke, despite all the discarded rubber boots in the hall and the weather-beaten hay rake disposed on the back lawn like some priceless piece of modern sculpture. "They all come to see me," he said, as he poured Chateau Petrus 64 for his guests. "Sometimes they want me to recall some bloody fool thing the department decided back in the 60s, or they want me to use my influence with someone upstairs, or they want me to sell some ghastly little Victorian commode they've inherited." Silas looked round the table to be sure everyone present remembered that he had a partnership in a Bond Street antique shop. The taciturn American, Brett Rensselaer, was squeezing the arm of the busty blonde he brought with him. "But I see them all. Believe me, I never get lonely." I felt sorry for old Silas. It was the sort of thing that only very lonely people claimed. Mrs. Porter, his cook-housekeeper, came through the door from the kitchen bearing a roast sirloin. "Good, I like beef," said my small son, Billy. Mrs. Porter smiled in appreciation. She was an elderly woman who had learned the value of a servant who heard nothing, saw nothing, and said very little. "I've no time for stews and pies and all those mixtures," explained Uncle Silas as he opened a second bottle of lemonade for the children. "I like to see a slice of real meat on my plate. I hate all those sauces and purées. The French can keep their cuisine." He poured a little lemonade for my son, and waited while Billy noted its colour and bouquet, took a sip, and nodded approval, just as Silas had instructed him to do. Mrs. Porter arranged the meat platter in front of Silas, and placed the carving knife and fork to hand before going to get the vegetables. Dickie Cryer dabbed wine from his lips with a napkin. The host's words seemed to be aimed at him. "I can't stand by and let you defame la cuisine française in such a cavalier fashion, Silas," Dickie smiled. "I'd get myself blackballed by Paul Bocuse." Silas served Billy with a huge portion of rare roast beef and went on carving. "Start eating," Silas commanded. Dickie's wife, Daphne, passed the plates. She worked in advertising and liked to dress in grandma clothes, complete with black velvet choker, cameo brooch, and small metal rim eyeglasses. She insisted on a very small portion of beef. Dickie saw my son spill gravy down his shirt and smiled at me pityingly. The Cryer boys were at boarding school. Their parents only saw them at vacation time. It's the only way to stay sane, Dickie had explained to me more than once. Silas carved into the meat with skilful concentration. There were oohs and ahs from the guests. Dickie Cryer said it was a sumptuous repast, and addressed Silas as mine host. Fiona gave me a blank stare as a warning against provoking Dickie into more such comments. "Cooking," said Silas, "is the art of the possible. The French have been brought up on odds and ends, chopped up and mixed up and disguised with flavoured sauces. I don't want that muck if I can afford some proper food. No one in their right mind would choose it." "Try la cuisine nouvelle," said Daphne Cryer, who was proud of her French accent. "Lightweight dishes, and each plate of food designed like a picture." "I don't want lightweight food," growled Silas, and brandished the knife at her. "Cuisine nouvelle," he said disdainfully. "Big, coloured plates with tiny scraps of food arranged in the centre. When cheap hotel restaurants did it, we called it portion control. We'll get the public relation boys on the job, and it's cuisine nouvelle, and they write long articles about it in ladies' magazines. When I pay for good food, I expect the waiter to serve me from a trolley and ask me what I want and how much I want, and I'll tell him where to put the vegetables. I don't want plates of meat and 2 veg carried from the kitchen by waiters who don't know a herring from a hot-cross bun." "This beef is done to perfection, Uncle Silas," said Fiona, who was relieved that he'd managed to deliver this passionate address without the usual interjected expletives. "But just a small slice for Sally. Well-done meat, if that's possible." "Good God, woman," he said. "Give your daughter something that will put a little blood into her veins. Well-done meat? No wonder she's looking so damn peaky." He placed 2 slices of rare beef on a warmed plate and cut the meat into bite-sized pieces. He always did that for the children. "What's peaky?" said Billy, who liked underdone beef and was admiring Silas's skill with the razor-sharp carving knife. "Pinched, white, anemic, and ill-looking," said Silas. He set the rare beef in front of Sally. "Sally is perfectly fit," said Fiona. There was no quicker way of upsetting her than to suggest that children were in any way deprived. I suspected it was some sort of guilt she shared with all working mothers. "Sally's the best swimmer in her class," said Fiona. "Aren't you, Sally?" "I was last term," said Sally in a whisper. "Get some rare roast beef into your belly," Silas told her. "It will make your hair curly." "Yes, Uncle Silas," she said. He watched her until she took a mouthful and smiled at him. "You're a tyrant, Uncle Silas," said my wife. But Silas gave no sign of having heard her. He turned to Daphne. "Don't tell me you want it well done," he said ominously. "Bleu for me," she said, "avec un petit peu de moutarde anglaise." "Pass Daphne the mustard," said Silas. "And pass her the pommes de terre. She could put a bit more weight on. It'll give you something to get hold of," he told Cryer, waving the carving fork at him. "Oh, I say, steady on," said Cryer, who didn't like such personal remarks aimed at his wife. Dickie Cryer declined the Charlotte Russe, having had an elegant sufficiency, so Billy and I shared Dickie's portion. Charlotte Russe was one of Mrs. Porter's specialities. When the meal was finished, Silas took the men to the billiards room, telling the ladies, "Walk down to the river or sit in the conservatory. Or there's a big log fire in the drawing-room if you're cold. Mrs. Porter will bring you coffee and brandy too if you fancy it. But men have to swear and belch now and again, and will smoke and talk shop and argue about cricket. It'll be boring for you. Go and look after the children. That's what nature intended women to do." They did not depart graciously. At least Daphne and Fiona didn't. Daphne called old Silas a rude pig, and Fiona threatened to let the children play in his study, a sanctum forbidden to virtually everyone, but it made no difference. He ushered the men into the billiards room and closed the ladies out. The gloomy billiards room with its mahogany panelling was unchanged since being furnished to the taste of a 19th-century beer baron. Even the antlers and family portraits remained in position. The windows opened onto the lawn, but the sky outside was dark and the room was lit only by the green light reflected from the tabletop. Dickie Cryer set up the table, and Brett selected a cue for himself while Silas removed his jacket and snapped his bright red braces before passing the drinks and cigars. "So Brahms 4 is acting the goat," said Silas, as he chose a cigar for himself and picked up the matches. "Well, are you all struck dumb?" He shook the matchbox so that the wooden matches rattled. "Well, I say," said Cryer, almost dropping the resin he was applying to the tip of his cue. "Oh, don't be a bloody fool, Dickie," Silas told him. "The DG is worried sick at the thought of losing the banking figures. He said you're putting Bernard in to sort it out for you." Cryer, who'd been very careful not to reveal to me that he'd mentioned me to the Director-General, fiddled with his cue to grant himself an extra moment of thought, and then said, "Bernard? Well, his name was put up, but I'm against it. Bernard's done his bit. I told him that." "Never mind the double talk, Dickie. Save all that for your committee meetings. The DG asked me to knock your heads together this weekend and try to come up with a few sensible proposals on Monday, Tuesday at the latest. This damn business could go pop, you know." He looked at the table and then at his guests. "Now, how shall we do this? Bernard's no earthly good, so he'd better partner me against you two." Brett said nothing. Dickie Cryer looked at Silas with renewed respect. Perhaps until that afternoon he hadn't fully realized the influence the old man still wielded. Or perhaps he hadn't realized that Silas was just the same unscrupulous old swine that he'd been when he was working inside. Just the same ruthless manipulator of people that Cryer tried to be. And Uncle Silas had always emerged from this sort of crisis smelling of roses, and that was something that Dickie Cryer hadn't always managed. "I still say Bernard must not go," insisted Cryer, but with less conviction now. "His face is too well known. Their watchers will be on to him immediately. One false move and we'll find ourselves over at the Home Office trying to figure out who we can swap for him." Like Silas, he kept his voice flat and contrived the casual offhand tone in which Englishmen prefer to discuss matters of life and death. He was leaning over the table by this time, and there was silence while he put down a ball. "So who will go?" said Silas, tilting his head to look at Cryer like a schoolmaster asking a backward pupil a very simple question. "We have shortlisted 5 or 6 people we deem suitable," said Cryer. "People who know Brahms 4. People he'll trust." "Brahms 4 will trust no one," said Cryer. "You know how agents become when they start talking of getting out." He stood back while Brett Rensselaer studied the table, then without fuss potted the chosen ball. Brett was Dickie's senior, but he was letting Dickie answer the questions as if he were no more than a bystander. That was Brett Rensselaer's style. "Good shot, Brett," said Silas. "So none of them have ever met him?" He smoked his cigar and blew smoke at Cryer. "Or have I misunderstood?" "Bernard's the only one who ever worked with him," admitted Cryer, taking off his jacket and placing it carefully on the back of an empty chair. "I can't even get a recent photo of him." "Brahms 4. Silas scratched his belly. "He's almost my age, you know. I knew him back when Berlin was Berlin. We shared girlfriends and fell down drunk together. I know him the way you only know men you grew up with. Berlin. Oh, I loved that town." "As well we know," said Cryer, with a touch of acid in his voice. He cleared the pocket and rolled the balls back along the table. "Brahms 4 tried to kill me at the end of 1946, said Silas, ignoring Cryer. "He waited outside a little bar near the Alexanderplatz and took a shot at me as I was framed against the light in the doorway." "He missed," said Cryer, with the appropriate amount of concern. "Yes. You'd think even an indifferent shot would be able to hit a big fellow like me, standing full square against the light, but the stupid bastard missed. Luckily, I was with my driver, a military policeman I'd had with me ever since I'd arrived. I was a civilian in uniform, you see. I needed a proper soldier to help me into my Sam Brown and remind me when to salute. Well, he laid into Brahms 4. I think he would have maimed him had I not been there. The corporal thought he'd aimed at him, you see. He was damned angry about it." Silas drank a little port, smoked his cigar, and watched my inexpert stroke in silence. Cryer dutifully asked him what had happened after that. "The Ruskies came running. Soldiers, regimental police, 4 of them, big peasant boys with dirty boots and unshaven chins. Wanted to take poor old Brahms 4 away. Of course, he wasn't called Brahms 4 then, that came later. Alexanderplatz was in their sector even if they hadn't yet built their wall. But I told them he was an English officer who'd had too much to drink." "And they believed you?" said Cryer. "No, but your average Russian has grown used to hearing lies. They didn't believe me, but they weren't about to demonstrate a lot of initiative to disprove it. They made a feeble attempt to pull him away, but my driver and I picked him up and carried him out to our car. There was no way the Russians would touch a vehicle with British Army markings. They knew what would happen to anyone meddling with a Russian officer's car without permission. So, that's how we brought him back to the West." "Why did he shoot at you?" I asked. "You like that brandy, do you?" said Silas. 20 years in the wood. Not so easy to get hold of vintage brandy nowadays." "Yes, well, he'd been watching me for a couple of days. He'd heard rumours that I was the one who'd put a lot of Galen's people in the bag, and his closest friend had got hurt in the roundup. But we talked about old times, and he saw sense after a while." I nodded. That vague explanation was Silas's polite way of telling me to mind my own business. We watched Brett Rensselaer play. Pocketing the red ball with a perfectly angled shot that brought the white back to the tip of his cue, he moved his position only slightly to make the next stroke. "And you've been running him since 1946? I said, looking at Silas. No, said Silas. "I kept him well away from our people in Hermsdorf. I had access to funds, and I sent him back into the east sector with instructions to lie low. He was with the Reichsbank during the war. His father was a stockbroker, and I knew that eventually the regime over there, communist or not, would desperately need men with top-level banking experience." "He was your investment," said Cryer. "Or you might say I was his investment," said Silas. The game was slower now, each man taking more time to line up his shot as he thought about other things. Cryer aimed, missed, and cursed softly. Silas continued. "We were both going to be in a position to help each other in the years ahead. That much was obvious. First he got a job with the tax people. Ever wondered how communist countries first become communist? It's not the secret police who do the deed, it's the tax collectors. That's how the communists wiped out private companies. They increased the tax rate steeply according to the number of employees. Only firms with less than a dozen employees had a chance of surviving. When they destroyed private enterprise, Brahms 4 was moved to the Deutsche Emissions and Girobank at the time of the currency reform. Dickie smiled triumphantly at me as he said to Silas, "And that later became the Deutsche Notenbank." Good guess, Dickie, I thought. "How long was he a sleeper?" I asked. "Long enough," said Silas. He smiled and drank his port. "Good port, this," he said, raising his glass to see the colour against the light from the window. "But the bloody doctors cut me back to 1 bottle a month. 1 bottle a month, I ask you." Yes, he was a sleeper all through the time when the service was rotten with traitors, when certain colleagues of ours were reporting back to the Kremlin every bloody thing we did. Yes, He was lucky, or clever, or a bit of both. His file was buried where no one could get at it. He survived. But, by God, I activated him once we got rid of those bastards. We were in bad shape, and Brahms 4 was a prime source. Personally, said Dickie Cryer. You ran him personally. He exchanged his cue for another, as if to account for his missed stroke. Brahms 4 made that a condition, said Silas. There was a lot of that sort of thing at that time. He reported to me personally. It made him feel safer, and it was good for me, too. And what happened when you were posted away from Berlin? I asked him. I had to hand him over to another control. Who was that? I asked. Silas looked at me as if deciding whether to tell me, but he had already decided. Everything was already decided by that time. Brett took over from me. We all turned to look anew at Brett Rensselaer. A dark-suited American in his middle 50s with fair receding hair and a quick, nervous smile. Brett was the sort of American who liked to be mistaken for an Englishman. Recruited into the service while at Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship, he'd become a dedicated Anglophile who'd served in many European stations before taking over as Deputy Controller of the European Economics Desk, which later became the Economics Intelligence Committee and was now Brett's private empire. If Brahms 4 dried up as a source, Brett Rensselaer's empire would virtually collapse. Little wonder he looked so nervous. It was Brett's shot again. He balanced his cue as if checking its weight, then reached for the resin. I ran Brahms 4 for years on a personal basis, just as Silas had done before me. Did you ever meet him face to face? I asked. No. I never went across to the east, and as far as I know, he never came out. He knew only my code name. He finally finished with the resin and placed it carefully on the ledge of the schoolboard. Which you'd taken from Silas, I said. What you're saying is that you carried on pretending to be Silas. Sure I did, said Brett, as if he'd intended to make this clear from the start. The only thing field men hate more than a control change is a secret control change with a name switch. It wasn't something any desk man would boast about. Brett had still not made his shot. He stood facing me calmly, but speaking a little more rapidly now that he was on the defensive. Brahms 4 related to Silas in a way no newcomer could hope to do. It was better to let him think his stuff was still coming to Silas. He leaned over the table to make his shot. Characteristically, it was faultless, and so was his next, but the third pot went askew. Even though Silas had gone, I said, moving aside and letting Silas see the table to choose his shot. I wasn't dead, said Silas indignantly over his shoulder as he pushed past. I kept in touch. A couple of times Brett came back here to consult with me. Frequently I sent a little parcel of forbidden goodies over to him. We knew he'd recognize the way I chose what he liked, and so on. But after last year's big reshuffle, he went soggy, Brett Rensselaer added sadly. He went very patchy. Some great stuff still came from him, but it wasn't 100% anymore. He began to ask for more and more money, too. No one minded that too much. He was worth everything he got. But we had the feeling he was looking for a chance to get out. And now the crunch has come? I asked. Could be, said Brett. Or it could simply be the prelude for another demand for money, said Silas. It's a pretty fancy one, said Brett. A pretty damn complicated way of getting a raise in pay. No, I think he wants out. I think he really wants out this time. What does he do with all this money? I asked. We've never discovered, said Brett. We've never been allowed to try, said Cryer bitterly. Each time we prepare a plan, it's vetoed by someone at the top. Take it easy, Dickie, said Brett, in that kind and conciliatory tone a man can employ when he knows he's the boss. No point in upsetting a darn good source just in order to find he's got a mistress stowed away somewhere, or that he likes to pile his dough into some numbered account in Switzerland. It was, of course, Silas who decided exactly how much it was safe to confide to me. "Let's just say we pay it into a Munich bank to be credited to a publishing house that never publishes anything," said Silas. If I was going over the wire, they'd make sure I knew only what they wanted me to know. That was the normal procedure. We all knew it. "Hell, he wants a chance to spend his pay," I said. "Nothing wrong with that, is there?" Silas turned to me with that spiteful look in his eye and said, "Nothing wrong with that unless you need the stuff he's sending us. Then there's everything wrong with it, Bernard. Everything wrong with it." He cleared the pocket and sent the ball down the table with such violence that it rebounded all the way back to him. There was a cruel determination in him. I'd glimpsed it more than once. "Okay. So, you're trying to prove that I'm the only one who can go and talk to him," I said. "I guess that's what this friendly little game is all about, or am I mistaken?" I fixed Silas with my stare, and he smiled ruefully. "You're not the right person," said Brett unconvincingly. No one else spoke. They all knew I was the right person. This damn get-together was designed to show me the decision was unanimous. Dickie Cryer touched his lips with the wet end of his cigar, but did not put it into his mouth. Brett said, "It would be like sending in the massed bands of the Brigade of Guards playing Rule Britannia. Brahms will be terrified, and rightly so. You'll have a tail from the moment you go over." "I don't agree," said Cryer. They were talking about me as if I were not present. I had the feeling that this was the sort of discussion that would take place if I went into the bag or got myself killed. "Bernard knows his way about over there, and he doesn't have to be there very long, just to talk with him so that we know what's on his mind, and show him how important it is for him to stay in position for a couple of years." "What about you, Bernard?" Silas asked me. "You haven't said much about it." "It sounds as if someone will have to go," I said. "And someone he knows would have a better chance of getting a straight answer." "And," said Brett apologetically, "there won't be much time. Is that what you mean?" Cryer said, "We sent a courier over by tour bus last month. He took the regular tourist bus over there and came back as easy as falling off a log." "Do they let tourists from West Berlin get off the bus nowadays?" asked Silas. "Oh, yes," said Cryer, smiling cheerfully. "Things have changed since your day, Silas. They all visit the Red Army Memorial. They even stop off for cakes and coffee. The DDR desperately wants Westmarks. Another good place for a meeting is the Pergamon Museum. Tour buses from the West go there, too." "What do you think, Bernard?" said Brett. He fidgeted with his signet ring and stared at the table as if interested in nothing but Cryer's tricky corner shot. I found their sort of conjecture exasperating. It was the stuff of which long memos are made, the paperwork under which the department is buried. I said, "What's the use of my guessing? Everything depends upon knowing what he's doing. He's not a peasant. He's a scholarly old man with an important and interesting job. We need to know whether he's still got a happy marriage, with good friends who make speeches at the birth celebrations of his grandchildren. Or has he become a miserable old loner, at odds with the world and needing Western-style medical care? Or maybe he's just discovered what it's like to be in love with a shapely 18-year-old nymphomaniac." Brett gave a short laugh and said, "2 first-class tickets to Rio, and don't spare the champagne." "Unless the shapely one's working for the KGB," I said. Brett stared at me impassively. "What would be the best way of depositing someone for this sort of job, Bernard?" "I certainly wouldn't discuss with you guys the way I'd choose to go over there, except to say I wouldn't want any arrangements made from this end. No documents, no preparations, no emergency link, no local backup, nothing at all. I'd want to do it myself." It was not the sort of private enterprise that the department liked to encourage. I was expecting vociferous objections to this proposal, but none came. "Quite right, too," said Silas. "And I haven't agreed to go," I reminded them. "We leave it to you," said Silas. The others, their faces only dimly seen in the gloom beyond the brightly lit table, nodded. Crier's hands, very white in the glare, crawled across the table like two giant spiders. He played the shot and missed. His mind wasn't on the game. Neither was mine. Silas pulled a face at Crier's missed stroke and sipped his port. "Bernard," he said suddenly, "I'd better—" He stopped mid-sentence. Mrs. Porter had entered the room quietly. She was holding a cut-glass tumbler and a cloth. Silas looked up to meet her eyes. "The phone, sir," she said. "It's the call from London." She didn't say who was calling from London because she took it for granted that Silas would know. In fact, we all knew, or guessed, that it was someone urgently interested in how the discussion had gone. Silas rubbed his face, looked at me, and said, "Bernard, help yourself to another brandy, if you fancy it." "Thanks," I said. But I had the feeling that Silas had been about to say something quite different. Weekends with Uncle Silas always followed the same pattern. An informal Saturday lunch, a game of billiards or bridge until tea-time, and a dress-up dinner. There were 14 people for dinner that Saturday evening. Us, the Criers, Rensselaer and his girlfriend, Fiona's sister, Tessa, her husband away, to partner Uncle Silas, an American couple named Johnson, who were in England buying antique furniture for their shop in Philadelphia, a young, trendy architect who converted cottages into dream houses and was making enough money at it to support a noisy new wife and a noisy old Ferrari, and a red-nosed local farmer who spoke only twice the whole evening, and then only to ask his frizzy-haired wife to pass the wine. "It was all right for you," said Fiona petulantly when we were in the little garret room preparing for bed that night. "I was sitting next to Dickie Crier. He only wants to talk about that beastly boat. He's going to France in it next month, he says." "Dickie doesn't know a mainsail from a marlinspike. He'll kill himself." "Don't say that, darling," said Fiona. "My sister Tessa is going too, and so is Ricky, that gorgeous young architect, and Colette, his amusing wife." There was a touch of acid in her voice. She wasn't too keen on them, and she was still angry at being shut out of our conference in the billiards room. "Must be a bloody big boat," I said. "It will sleep 6, 8 if you're all friendly," Daphne told me. "She's not going. She gets seasick." I looked at her quizzically. "Is your sister having an affair with Dickie Crier?" "How clever you are," said Fiona, in a voice from which any trace of admiration had been carefully eliminated. "But you are behind the times, darling. She's fallen for someone much older, she told me." "She's a bitch." "Most men find her attractive," said Fiona. For some reason, Fiona got a secret satisfaction from hearing me condemn her sister, and was keen to provoke more of the same. "I thought she was reconciled with her own husband." "It was a trial," said Fiona. "I'll bet it was," I agreed, "especially for George." "You were sitting next to the antique lady. Was she amusing?" "A lady in the antique business," I corrected her description, and she smiled. "She told me to beware of dressers. They are likely to have modern tops and antique bottoms." "How bizarre," said Fiona. She giggled. "Where can I find one?" "Right here," I said, and jumped into bed with her. "Give me that damned hot water bottle." "That's no hot water bottle, that's me. Oh, your hands are freezing." I was awakened by one of the farm dogs barking. And then, from somewhere across the river, there came the echoing response of some other dog on some other farm. I opened my eyes to see the time, and found the bedside light on. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. Fiona was in her dressing gown, drinking tea. "I'm sorry," she said. "It was the dog. I can never sleep properly away from home. I went downstairs and made tea. I brought up an extra cup. Would you like some?" "Just half a cup. You've been awake long." "I thought I heard someone go downstairs. It's a creepy old house, isn't it? There's a biscuit if you want it." I took just the tea and sipped some. Fiona said, "Did you promise to go? Berlin. Did you promise?" It was as if she felt my decision would reveal how important she was to me compared with my job. I shook my head. "But that's what your billiards game was all about." I guessed so. Silas was so adamant about not having any of us in there. Sometimes I wonder if he realizes that I'm senior staff now. They're all worried about the Brahms 4 business. But why send you? What reason did they give? Well, who else could go? Silas? I told her the essence of the conversation that had taken place in the billiards room. The dogs began barking again. From downstairs I heard a door closing and then Silas trying to quieten the dogs. His voice was hoarse, and he spoke to them in the same way he spoke to Billy and Sally. "I saw the memo that Rensselaer sent to the DG," Fiona said, speaking more quietly now as if frightened that we might be overheard. 5 pages. I took it back to my office and read it through. I looked at her in surprise. Fiona was not the sort of person who disobeyed the regulations so flagrantly. "I had to know," she added. I drank my tea and said nothing. I wasn't even sure I wanted to know what Rensselaer and Dickie Cryer had in store for me. "Brahms 4 might have gone crazy," she said finally. "Brett and Dickie both suggest that is a real possibility." She waited while the words took effect. "They think he might have had some kind of mental breakdown. That's why they're worried. There's simply no telling what he might do." "Is that what it said in the memo?" I laughed. "That's just Brett and Dickie covering their asses." Dickie suggested that they let some high-powered medical people attempt a diagnosis on the basis of Brahms 4's reports, but Brett squashed that. "It sounds just like one of Cryer's bright ideas," I said. "Let the head shrinkers into a meeting, and we'll be the front page of next week's Sunday newspaper's review section, complete with misquotes, misspellings, and bits written by our own correspondents. Thank Christ Brett killed that one. What form does the Brahms 4 madness take? The usual sort of paranoia, enemies round every corner, no one..."
In between each chapter lies a quiet space. Take this moment to settle in and enjoy the music gently holding you. This audiobook is shared freely for you.
Trust? Can he have a full list of everyone with access to his reports? Do we know there are top-level leaks of everything he sends us, the usual sort of loony stuff that people imagine when they're going round the bend? I nodded. Fiona didn't have the faintest idea of what an agent's life was like. Dickie and Brett had no idea either. None of these desk bastards knew. My father used to say, "Eternal paranoia is the price of liberty. Vigilance is not enough." "Maybe Brahms 4 is right," I said. "Maybe there are enemies round every corner over there." I remembered Cryer telling me the way the department helped Brahms 4 to ingratiate himself with the regime. He must have made a lot of enemies. "Maybe he's not so loony." "And top-level security leaks too," Fiona said. "It wouldn't be the first time, would it?" "Brahms 4 asked for you. Did they tell you that?" "No." I concealed my surprise. So that was at the back of all their anxiety in the billiards room. "He doesn't want any more contact with his regular control. He's told them he'll deal with no one but you." I'll bet that finally convinced the DG that he was crazy. I put the empty teacup on the side table and switched out my bedside light. "I've got to get some sleep," I told her. I wish I could manage on 5 hours a night like you, but I need a lot of sack time. You won't go, will you? Promise you won't. I grunted and buried my face in the pillow. I always sleep face downwards. It stays dark longer that way. Chapter 5. On Monday afternoon, I was in Brett Rensselaer's office. It was on the top floor, not far from the suite the DG occupied. All the top-floor offices were decorated to the personal taste of the occupants. It was one of the perks of seniority. Brett's room was modern, with glass and chrome and grey carpet. It was hard, austere, and colourless. A habitat just right for Brett, with his dark worsted Savile Row suit and the crisp white shirt and club tie, and his fair hair that was going white, and the smile that seemed shy and fleeting but was really the reflex action that marked his indifference. The nod, the smile, and the finger pointed at the black leather Chesterfield did not interrupt the conversation he was having on his white phone. I sat down and waited for him to finish telling a caller that there was no chance of them meeting for lunch that day, next day, or any day in the future. "Are you a poker player, Bernard?" he said, even while he was putting the phone down. "Only for matchsticks," I replied cautiously. "Ever wonder what will happen to you when you retire?" "No," I said. "No plans to buy a bar in Malaga or a market garden in Sussex?" "Is that what you're planning?" I said. Brett smiled. He was rich, very rich. The idea of him working a market garden in Sussex was hilarious. As for Malaga and its plebeian diversions, he'd divert the plane rather than enter its airspace. "I guess your wife has money," said Rensselaer. He paused. "But I'd say you're the type of inverted snob who wouldn't want to use any of it." "Would that make me an inverted snob?" "If you were smart enough to invest her dough and double it, you'd do no one any harm, right?" "In the evenings, you mean? Or would that be instead of working here?" "Every time I ask you questions, I find you asking me questions." "I didn't know I was being questioned," I said. "Am I being vetted?" "In this business, it does no harm to flip the pages of someone's bank account from time to time," said Rensselaer. "You'll find only moths in mine," I said. "No family money." "Family money? I was 30 years old before I got a nanny." "People like you who've worked in the field always have money and securities stashed away. I'll bet you've got numbered bank accounts in a dozen towns." "What would I put into them? Luncheon vouchers?" "Goodwill," he said. "Goodwill. Until the time comes." He picked up the short memo I'd sent him about Werner Folkman's import-export business. So that was it. He was wondering if I was sharing the profit in Werner's business. "Folkman's not making enough dough to pay handsome kickbacks, if that's what you're thinking," I said. "But you want the department to bankroll him." He was still standing behind his desk. He liked being on his feet, moving about like a boxer, shifting his weight and twisting his body as if avoiding imaginary blows. "You'd better get yourself some new bifocals," I said. "There's no suggestion that the department give him a penny." Brett smiled. When he got tired of playing the shy Mr. Nice Guy, he'd suddenly go for confrontation, accusation, and insult, but at least he was unlikely to go behind your back. "Maybe I read it hurriedly. What the hell is forfeiting, anyway?" Brett was like one of those high court judges who lean over and ask, "What is a male chauvinist, or a mainframe computer?" They know what they think these things are, but they want them defined by mutual agreement and written into the court record. "Folkman raises cash for West German companies so they can be paid promptly after exporting goods to East Germany." "How does he do that?" said Brett, looking down and fiddling with some papers on his desk. "There's a hell of a lot of complicated paperwork," I said. "But the essential part of it is that they send details of the shipment and the prices to an East German bank. They sign them and rubber stamp them and agree that it's all okay with the East German importers. They also agree on the dates of the payments. Folkman goes to a bank or a syndicate of banks or any other source of cash in the West and uses that aval to discount the cash that pays for the goods. It's like factoring. But it's more complicated because you're dealing with a lot of people, most of them bureaucrats. And your pal Folkman gets a margin on each deal. That's sweet. It's a tough business, Brett, I said. There are a lot of people offering to cut a fraction of a percentage off the next one to get the business. But Folkman has no banking background. He's a hustler. I breathed in slowly. You don't have to be a banker to get into it, I said patiently. Werner Folkman has been doing those forfeiting deals for several years now. He has good contacts in the East. He moves in and out of the Eastern sector with minimum fuss. They like him because they know he tries to do tie-in deals with East German exports. Brett held up his hand. What tie-in deals? A lot of the banks just want to handle cash. Werner is prepared to shop around for a customer in the West who'll take some East German exports. In that way, he can save them some hard currency and maybe even swing a deal where the export price equals the money due for the imports. Ah, is that so? Said Brett, reflectively. Folkman could be very useful for us, Brett, I said. How? Moving money? Moving goods? Moving people? We do that already. But how many people do we have who can go back and forth without question? So, what's Folkman's problem? You know what Frank Harrington is like. He doesn't get along with Werner, and never has. And anyone Frank doesn't like, Berlin never uses. Frank is Berlin, I said. It's a small staff there now, Brett. Frank has to approve every damned thing. And you want me to tell Frank how to run his Berlin office. Do you ever read anything I send you, Brett? It says there that I just want the department to approve a rollover guarantee of funds from one of our own merchant banks. And that's money, said Brett triumphantly. We're simply talking about one of our own banking outfits using their expertise to give Werner normal facilities at current bank rates. So why can't he get that already? Because the sort of banks which best back these forfeiting deals want to know who Werner Folkman is. And this department has an old-fashioned rule that one-time field agents shouldn't go around giving the DG as a reference, or saying that the way he got to learn about the forfeiting business was by running agents across the wall since they were 18 years old. So tell me how Folkman has stayed in business. By going outside the regular banking network. By raising money from the money market. But that means trimming his agent's fee. It's making life tough for him. If he gives up the forfeiting business, we'll lose a good opportunity and a useful contact. Suppose he fouls up on one of these deals and the bank doesn't get its money. Oh, for Christ's sake, Brett. The boys in the bank are big enough to change their own nappies, and they'll squeal bloody murder. What do we have those lousy banks for, unless it's for this kind of job? What kind of dough are we talking about? 1,000,000 Deutschmark rolling over would be about right. Are you out of your tiny mind? Said Brett. 1,000,000 Deutschmark. For that no-good son of a bitch? No, sir. He scratched the side of his nose. Did Folkman put you up to all this? Not a word. He likes to show me what a big success he is. So, how do you know he's strapped for cash? In this business, I said, it does no harm to flip the pages of someone's bank account from time to time. One of these days you'll come unstuck doing one of your unofficial investigations into something that doesn't concern you. What would you do if the bells started ringing? I'd just swear it was an official investigation, I said. The hell you would, said Rensselaer. I started to leave the room. Before you go, he said, what would you say if I told you that Brahms 4 asked for you? Suppose I said he won't trust anyone else in the department. What would you say about that? I'd say he sounds like a good judge of character. Okay, smartass. Now let's have an answer for the record. It could simply mean he trusts me. He doesn't know many department people on personal terms. Very diplomatic, Bernard. Well, downstairs in evaluation they're beginning to think that Brahms 4 has been turned. Most people I've spoken with downstairs are now saying Brahms 4 might have been a senior KGB man from the time Silas Gaunt first encountered him in that bar. And most people downstairs, I said patiently, wouldn't recognize a senior bloody KGB officer if he walked up to them waving a red flag. Rensselaer nodded, as if considering this aspect of his staff for the first time. Could be you're right, Bernard. He always said Bernard with the accent on the second syllable. It was the most American thing about him. It was at that moment that Sir Henry Cleavemore came into the room. He was a tall, aloof figure, slightly unkempt, with that well-worn appearance that the British upper class cultivate to show they are not nouveau riche. "I'm most awfully sorry, Brett," said the Director-General, as he caught sight of me. "I'd no idea you were in conference." He frowned as he looked at me and tried to remember my name. "Good to see you, Samson," he said eventually. "I hear you spent the weekend with Silas. Did you have a good time? What's he got down there, fishing?" "Billiards," I said. "Mostly billiards." The DG gave a little smile and said, "Yes, that sounds more like Silas." He turned away to look at Brett's desktop. "I've mislaid my spectacles," he said. "Did I leave them in here?" "No, sir, you haven't been in here this morning," said Brett. "But I seem to remember that you keep spare reading glasses in the top drawer of your secretary's desk. Shall I get them for you?" Of course. Yeah, you're right," said the DG. "The top drawer. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, my secretary's off sick this morning. I'm afraid I simply can't manage when she's away." He smiled at Brett, and then at me to make it perfectly clear that this was a joke born out of his natural humility and goodwill. "The old man's got a lot on his plate right now," said Brett loyally after Sir Henry had ambled off along the corridor, muttering apologies about interrupting our conference. "Does anyone know who'll take over when he goes?" I asked Brett. "Goes gaga," I almost said. "There's no date fixed, but it could be the old man will get back into his stride again and go on for the full 3 years. I looked at Brett, and he looked back at me, and finally he said, "Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, Bernard." Chapter 6. The two sisters were not much alike. My wife, Fiona, was dark, with a wide face and a mouth that smiled easily. Tessa, the younger one, was light-haired, almost blonde, with blue eyes and a serious expression that made her look like a small child. Her hair was straight and long enough to touch her shoulders, and she sometimes flicked it back behind her or let it fall across her face so that she looked through it. It was no surprise to find Tessa in my drawing-room when I got back from the office. The two of them were very close. The result, perhaps, of having suffered together the childhood miseries that their pompous, autocratic father thought character-forming. And Fiona had been working hard over the past year to patch together Tessa's marriage to George, a wealthy car dealer. There was an open bottle of champagne in the ice bucket, and already the level was down as far as the label. "Are we celebrating something?" I asked as I took off my coat and hung it in the hall. "Don't be so bloody bourgeois," said Tessa, handing me a champagne flute filled right to the brim. That was one of the problems of marrying into wealth. There were no luxuries. "Dinner at 8:30, said Fiona, embracing me decorously, her champagne held aloft so that she would spill none of it while giving me a kiss. "Mrs. Diaz has kindly stayed late." Mrs. Diaz, our Portuguese cook, housekeeper, and general factotum, was always staying late to cook the dinner. I wondered how much her labour was costing us. The cost, like so many other household expenses, would end up buried somewhere deep in the accounts and paid for out of Fiona's trust fund income. She knew I didn't like it, but I suppose she disliked cooking even more than arguing with me about it. I sat down on the sofa and tasted the champagne. "Delicious," I said. "Tessa brought it with her," explained Fiona. A gift from an admirer, said Tessa archly. Am I permitted to ask his name? I said. I saw Fiona glaring at me, but I pretended not to be aware of it. All in good time, darling, said Tessa. For the moment he remains incognito. In flagrante delicto, did you say? You sod, she said, and laughed. And how's George? I said. We live our own lives, said Tessa. Don't upset Tessa, Fiona told me. He's not upsetting me, Tessa said, tossing her hair back with her bejewelled white hand. I like George, and I always will like him. We're simply not able to live together without quarrelling. Does that mean you're getting a divorce? I asked, drinking a little more of the champagne. George doesn't want a divorce, she explained. It suits him to use the house like a hotel during the week, and he has the cottage to take his fancy ladies to. Does George have fancy ladies? I said, with no more than perfunctory interest. It has been known, said Tessa. But he's making so much money these days, I don't think he has much time for anything but his business. Lucky man, I said. Everyone else I know is going broke. Well, that's where George is so clever, Tessa explained. He got the dealerships for smaller, cheaper cars years ago, and no one seemed to want them. She said it proudly. Even wives who quarrel with their husbands take pride in their achievements. Fiona reached for the champagne. She wrapped it in a cloth and poured the rest of it into our glasses with the dexterity of a sommelier. She took care not to touch the bottle on the glass, and the cloth was crossed so as to leave the label still visible as she served. Such professional niceties came naturally to someone who'd grown up in a house with domestic servants. As she poured mine, she said, Tess wants me to help her find a flat. And furnish it and do it up, said Tessa. I'm no earthly good at anything like that. Look at the mess I made of the place I'm living in now. George never liked it there. Sometimes I think that was where our marriage began to go all wrong. But it's a lovely house, said Fiona loyally. It's just too big for the two of you. It's old and dark, said Tessa. It's a bit of a dump, really. I can understand why George hates it. He only agreed to buying it because he wanted to have an address in Hampstead. It was a step up from Islington, but he says we can't afford Mayfair. And this new place, I inquired. Is George going to like that? Give over, said Tessa, employing the jocular Cockney accent that she thought particularly apt when talking to me. I haven't found a place yet. That's what I want help with. I go and see places, but I can never make my mind up on my own. I listen to what these sharp estate agents tell me, and I believe it. That's my trouble. Whatever kind of trouble Tessa had suffered in her life, it was not on account of her believing anything any man told her. But I did not contradict her. I nodded and finished my drink. It was almost time for dinner. The ever-cheerful Mrs. Diaz was an adequate cook, but I wasn't sure I could face another plate of her.
There's no rush. The story will wait. For now, let the music ease your mind and bring you into a calm rhythm. Thank you for being here with us.
You wouldn't mind, darling, would you? Said Fiona. Mind what? I said. Oh, you helping Tessa find a flat? No, of course not. You're a sweetie, Tessa told me, and to Fiona she said, You're lucky to have got your hands on Bernard before I saw him. I've always said he was a wonderful husband. I said nothing. Only Tessa could make being a wonderful husband sound like a carrier of pestilence. Tessa leaned back on the sofa. She was wearing a smoky grey silk button-through dress that was shiny on the curves. One hand held her champagne and the other was toying with a real pearl necklace. Nervously she crossed and recrossed her legs and twisted the pearls tight against her white neck. "Tessa wants to tell you something," Fiona said. "Any more of that champagne, darling?" I said. "Tessa's Dom Perignon's all finished," said Fiona. "You'll have to have Sainsbury's from the fridge." "Sainsbury's from the fridge sounds delicious," I said, passing my empty glass to her. "What do you want to ask me, Tessa?" "Do you know a man named Giles Trent?" she said. "Works for the FO. Tall man, grey wavy hair, low voice, upper crust accent. Older than me and not nearly so handsome." "Not exactly for the Foreign Office," said Tessa archly. "His office is in the FO, but he's part of your organisation." "Did he tell you that?" I said. "Yes," said Tessa. "He shouldn't have," I said. "I know," said Tessa. "I was talking to Fiona about him, and she says that Giles Trent was working with your lot in Berlin back in 1978. She says he's quite important." Fiona came in with the champagne, poured a glass for me. I said, "Well, if that's what Fiona says." Fiona said, "Tessa is my sister, darling. She's not going to go blurting out all your secrets to the Russians, are you, Tess?" "Not until the right Russian comes my way. Even then. I mean, did you ever see those photos of Russian ladies?" She held the pearl necklace in her mouth. It was a babyish gesture. She liked being a baby. "What about Giles Trent?" I said. Tessa toyed with the necklace again. "I got to know him last summer. I met him at a dinner party given by some people who lived down the road from us. He had tickets for Covent Garden, Mozart. Oh, I forget the name of the opera, but everyone was saying how difficult it was to get tickets, and Giles could get them. Well, it was heavenly. Yeah, I mean, I'm not awfully keen on opera, but we had a box and a bottle of champagne in the interval. And you had an affair with him." I finished it for her. "He's a handsome brute, Bernie. And George was away watching the Japanese making motor cars." "Why not go with him?" I said. "If you'd ever been on one of those trips that car manufacturers provide for the dealers, you wouldn't ask. Wives are superfluous, darling. There are hot and cold running girls in every bedroom." Fiona poured champagne for herself and Tessa and said, "Tess wants to tell you about Giles Trent. She doesn't want your advice on her marriage." This admonition, like all such wifely admonitions, was delivered with a smile and a laugh. "So, tell me about Giles Trent," I said. "You were joking just now, I know, but Giles is older than you, Bernie, quite a bit older. He's a bachelor, he's very set in his ways. I thought he was queer at first. He's so neat, tidy and fussy about what he wears and what he eats and all that. In the kitchen, he has this divine house off the King's Road. All his chopping knives and saucepans are placed side by side, smallest on the left, biggest on the right, and it's so perfect that I was frightened to boil an egg and slice a loaf in case I spilled crumbs on the spotless tiled floor or marked the chopping board." "Tell me how you first discovered he wasn't queer," I said. "I said he wouldn't listen to me," Tessa complained to Fiona. "I said he'd just make sarcastic remarks all the time, and I was right." "It's serious, Bernard," said my wife. She only called me Bernard when things were serious. "You mean it's wedding bells for Tessa and Giles?" "I mean Giles Trent is passing intelligence material to someone from the Russian embassy." There was a long silence, until finally I said, "Shit." "Giles Trent has been in the service a long time," said Fiona. "Longer than I have," I said. "Giles Trent was lecturing at the training school by the time I got there." "In Berlin he was in signals at one time," said Fiona. "Yes," I said. "And he compiled that training report for interrogators." "I don't like the sound of that. Giles Trent, eh?" "Giles Trent doesn't seem the type," said Fiona. All the ladies had a soft spot for the elegant and gentlemanly Giles Trent. He raised his hat to them, and always had a clean shirt. "They never are the type," I said. "But no contacts with field agents," said Fiona. "Well, let's be thankful for that, at least," I said. I looked at Tessa. Have you mentioned all this to anyone? Only to Daddy, said Tessa. He said forget all about it. Good old Daddy, I said. Always there when you need him. Mrs. Diaz came in, bearing a large platter of shrimp fried in batter. Don't eat too many, sir, she said in her shrill accent. Make you very fat. The Portuguese are a lugubrious breed, and yet Mrs. Diaz was always smiling. I had the feeling that we were paying her too much. You're wonderful, Mrs. Diaz, said my wife, smiling, although the smile faded when she recognized the shrimps as those she'd set aside in the kitchen to thaw for next day's lunch. She's a treasure, said Tessa, taking a sample of the fried shrimp and burning her mouth so that she had to spit pieces of shrimp into her paper napkin. Oh, my God, it's hot, she said, pulling a face. Fiona, who hated anything fried in batter, waved a hand as I offered her the plate. I took one, blew on it, and ate it. It wasn't bad. We'll manage now, Mrs. Diaz, said Fiona airily. I twisted round to see Mrs. Diaz standing at the door watching us with a big smile. She disappeared into the kitchen again. There was a cloud of smoke and a loud crash which we all pretended not to hear. I said to Tessa, How do you know he's passing stuff to the Russians? He told me, she said. Just like that. We'd started off in the middle of the afternoon, drinking at some funny little club in Soho while Giles was watching the horses on TV. He won some money on one of the races, and we went to the Ritz. We'd met a few friends by then, and Giles wanted to impress everyone by giving them dinner. I suggested Annabelle's. George is a member. We stayed there late, and Giles turned out to be a super dancer. Is this all leading up to something he told you in bed? I said, wearily. Well, yes. We went back to this dear little place he has off the King's Road, and I'd had a few drinks, and to tell you the truth, I thought of George with all those Oriental popsies, and I thought, what the hell? And I let Giles talk me into staying there. What exactly did he say, Tessa? Because it's nearly 8:30, and I'm getting hungry. He woke me up in the middle of the night. It was absolutely ghastly. He sat up in bed and howled. It was positively orgasmic, darling. You've no idea. He howled for help or something. It was a nightmare. I mean, I've had nightmares, and I've seen other people having nightmares. At school, half the girls in the dorm had nightmares every night, didn't they, Fee? But not like this. He was bathed in sweat and trembling like a leaf. Giles Trent, I said. Yes, I know. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, he's so damned stiff upper lip and Grenadier Guards. But there he was, shouting and having this nightmare. I had to shake him for ages before he awoke. Fiona said, Tell Bernie what he was shouting. He shouted, Help me! They made me do it! And please, please, please! Then I went and got him a big drink of Perrier water. He said that was what he wanted. He pulled himself together and seemed all right again, and then he suddenly asked me what I'd say if he told me he was a spy for the Russians. I said I'd laugh. And he nodded and said, well, it was true anyway. So I said, for money? Do you do it for money? I was joking because I thought he was joking, you see. So what did he say about money? I asked. Well, I knew he wasn't short of money, said Tessa. He was at Eton, and he knows anyone who's anyone. He has the same tailor as Daddy, and he's not cheap. And Giles is a member of so many clubs, and you know how much club subscriptions cost nowadays. Well, George is always on about that, but he has to take business people out, of course. But Giles never complains about money. His father bought in the freehold of this place where he lives, and gave him an allowance that's enough to keep body and soul together. And he has his salary, I said. Well, that doesn't go far, Bernie, said Tessa. How do you imagine you and Fiona would manage if all she had was your salary? Other people manage, I said. But not people like us, said Tessa, in a voice of sweet reasonableness. Poor Fiona has to buy Sainsbury's champagne because she knows you'll grumble if she gets the sort of champers Daddy drinks. Hurriedly, Fiona said, Tell Bernie what Giles said about meeting the Russian. He told me about meeting this fellow from the trade delegation. Giles was in a pub somewhere near the Portobello Road one night. He likes finding new pubs that no one knows about except the locals. It was closing time. He asked the publican for another drink, and they wouldn't serve him. Then a man standing at the counter offered to take him to a chess club in Soho, Carr's Club in Gerrard Street. Well, there's a members' bar there which serves drinks until 3 in the morning. This Russian was a member and offered to put Giles up for membership, and Giles joined. It's not much of a place from what I can gather, arty people and writers and so on. He plays chess rather well, and it began to be a habit that he went there regularly and played the Russian, or just watched someone else playing. When was the night of this nightmare? I said. Why, I don't remember exactly, but a little while ago. And he's told you about the Russians on several occasions, or just that once, in the middle of the night? I brought it up again, said Tessa. I was curious. I wanted to find out if it was a joke or not. Giles Trent remembered your name, and he knows Fiona too, so I guessed that he was on secret work of some kind. Last Friday, we got back to his place very late, and he was showing me this electronic chess-playing machine he'd just bought. I said he wouldn't have to go to that club any more. He said he liked going there. I asked him if he wasn't frightened that someone would see him with this Russian and suspect him of spying. Giles collapsed on the bed and muttered something about they might be right, if that's what they suspected. He had been drinking a lot that night, mostly brandy, and I'd noticed before that it affects him in a way other drinks don't. By now Tessa had become very quiet and serious. It was a new sort of Tessa. I'd only known her in her role of uninhibited adventuress. Go on, I prompted her. Tessa said, Well, I still thought he was joking, and I was just making a gag out of it. But he wasn't joking. I wish to God I could get out of it, he said. But they've got me now, and I'll never be free of them. I will end up at the Old Bailey, sentenced to 30 years. I said, couldn't he escape? Couldn't he get on a plane and go somewhere? What did he say? And end up in Moscow? I'd sooner be in an English prison listening to English voices cursing me than spend the rest of my life in Moscow. Can you imagine what it must be like? He said. And he went on all about the sort of life that Kim Philby and those other two had in Moscow. I realised then that he must have been reading up all about it and worrying himself to death. Tessa sipped her champagne. Fiona said, What will happen now, Bernie? We can't leave it like this, I said. I'll have to make it official. I don't want Tessa's name brought into it, said Fiona. Tessa was looking at me. How can I promise that? I said. I'd sooner let it drop, said Tessa. Let it drop, I said. This is not some camper who's trampled through your dad's barley field and you being asked if you want to press charges for trespass. This is espionage. If I don't report what you've told me, I could be in the dock at the Old Bailey with him, and so could you and Fiona. Is that right? Said Tessa. It was typical of her that she asked her sister rather than me. There was a simple directness about everything Tessa said and did, and it was difficult to remain angry with her for long. She confirmed all those theories about the second child. Tessa was sincere but shallow. She was loving but mercurial. She was an exhibitionist without enough confidence to be an actor. While Fiona displayed all the characteristics of elder children: stability, confidence, intellect in abundance, and that cold reserve with which to judge all the shortcomings of the world. Yes, Tess, what Bernie says is right. I'll see what I can do, I said. I can't promise anything. But I'll tell you this. If I am able to keep your name out of it, and you let me down by breathing a word of this conversation to anyone at all, including that father of yours, I'll make sure you and he and anyone else covering up are charged under the appropriate sections of the Act. Thank you, Bernie, said Tessa. It would be so rotten for George. He's the only one I'm thinking of, I said. You're not so tough, she said. You're a sweetie at heart, you know that. You ever say that again, I told Tessa, and I'll punch you right in the nose. She laughed. Oh, you're so funny, she said. Fiona went out of the room to get a progress report on the cooking. Tessa moved along the sofa to be closer to where I was sitting at the other end of it. Is he in bad trouble? Giles. Is he in bad trouble? There was a note of anxiety in her voice. It was uncharacteristically deferent to me, the sort of voice one uses to a physician about to make a prognosis. If he cooperates with us, he'll be all right. It wasn't true, of course, but I didn't want to alarm her. I'm sure he'll cooperate, she said, sipping her drink and then looking at me with a smile that said she didn't believe a word of it. How long since he met this Russian? I asked. Quite a time. You could find out from when he joined the chess club, couldn't you? Tessa shook her glass and watched the bubbles rise. She was using some of the skills she'd learned at drama school the year before she'd met George and married him instead of becoming a film star. She leaned her head to one side and looked at me meaningfully. There's nothing bad in Giles, but sometimes he can be a fool. I'll have to speak to you again, Tessa. You'll probably have to repeat it all to an investigating officer and write it out and sign it. She placed a finger on the rim of her glass and ran it round a couple of times. I'll help you on the condition you go easy on Giles. I'll go easy, I promised. Hell, what else could I say? Dinner was served on the Minton china, and the table set with wedding presents, antique silver cutlery from Fiona's parents, and a cut-glass vase that my father had discovered in one of the Berlin junk markets he visited regularly on Saturday mornings. The circular dining table was very big for 3 people, so we seated ourselves side by side, with Tessa between us. The main course was some sort of chicken stew, the quantity of it far too small for the serving dish in which it came to the table. Mrs. Diaz had a big gravy mark on her white apron, and she was no longer smiling. After Mrs. Diaz had returned to the kitchen, Fiona whispered that Mrs. Diaz had broken the small serving dish, and half the chicken stew had gone onto the kitchen floor. "And why the hell are we whispering?" I said. "I knew you'd start shouting," said Fiona. "I'm not shouting," I said. "I'm simply asking—" "We all hurt you," said Fiona. "And if you upset Mrs. Diaz and we lose her—" She left it unsaid. "But why are you trying to make me feel guilty?" I said. "He's always like this when something gets broken," said Fiona, "unless, of course, he did it himself." I shared out what little there was of the chicken. I took plenty of boiled rice. Fiona had opened one of the few good clarets left in the cupboard, and I poured it gratefully. "Would you like to come and stay with me while Bernard's away?" Fiona asked her sister. "Where are you going?" Tessa asked me. "It's not settled yet," I said. "I'm not sure I'm going anywhere." "Berlin," said Fiona. "I hate being here alone." "Oh, I'd love to, darling," Tessa said. "When?" "I've told you it's not arranged yet," I said. "I might not go." "Soon," said Fiona. "Next week or the week following." Mrs. Diaz came in to remove the plates and solicit praise and gratitude for her cookery. These were provided in abundance by Fiona, with Tessa echoing her every superlative. "Signor Sam." To her I was always Signor Sam. She never said Signor Samson. "Signor Sam, he like it?" She asked Fiona this question rather than addressing it to me. It was rather like hearing Uncle Silas and Brett Rensselaer and Dickie Cryer discussing my chances of escaping from Berlin alive. "Look at his plate," said Fiona cheerfully. "Not a scrap left, Mrs. Diaz." There was nothing left, because my share was one lousy drumstick and wishbone. The greater part of the chicken stew was now spread out on kitchen foil in the garden, being devoured by the neighbourhood's cat population. I could hear them arguing and knocking over the empty milk bottles outside the back door. "It was delicious, Mrs. Diaz," I said, and Fiona rewarded me with a beaming smile that vanished as the kitchen door closed. "Do you have to be so bloody ironic?" said Fiona. "It was delicious. I told her it was delicious. Next time, you can interview the women the agency send round. Maybe then you'd realise how lucky you are." Tessa hugged me. "Don't be hard on him, Fiona, darling. You should have heard George when the au pair dropped his wretched video recorder." "Oh, that reminds me," Fiona said, leaning forward to catch my attention. You wanted to record that W.C. Fields film tonight. Right, I said. What time was it on? 8 o'clock, said Fiona. You've missed it, I'm afraid. Tessa reached up to put her hand over my mouth before I spoke. Mrs. Diaz came in with some cheese and biscuits. I told him to set the timer, said Fiona, but he wouldn't listen. Men are like that, said Tessa. You should have said, don't set the timer, then he would have set it. I'm always having to do that sort of thing with George. Tessa left early. She had arranged to see an old school friend at the Savoy Hotel bar. That must be some school, I said to Fiona when she came back into the drawing room after seeing her sister to the door. I always let her see her sister to the door. There were always sisterly little confidences exchanged at the time of departure. She'll never change, said Fiona. Poor George, I said. Fiona came and sat next to me and gave me a kiss. Was I awful tonight? She asked. Asinus asino et sus sui pulcher. An ass is beautiful to an ass, so is a pig to a pig. Fiona laughed. You were always using Latin tags when I first met you. Now you don't do that anymore. I've grown up, I said. Don't grow up too much, she said. I love you as you are. I responded by kissing her for a long time. Poor Tess. It had to happen to her, didn't it? She's so muddle-headed, she can't remember her own birthday, let alone the date she met Giles. I'm so glad you didn't start shouting at her, or want to list it all in chronological order. Someone will eventually, I said. Did you have a terrible day? She asked. Brett Rensselaer won't let Werner use the bank. Did you have a row with him? Said Fiona. He had to show me how tough you get after sitting behind a desk for 15 years. What did he say? I told her. I've seen you punch people for less than that, said Fiona, having listened to my account of Rensselaer's tough guy act. He was just sounding me out, I said. I don't take any of that crap seriously. None of it. Rensselaer and Cryer don't think that Brahms 4 has been turned, neither does the DG. You can bet on that. If they thought he was working for the KGB, we wouldn't be debating which member of the London staff goes over there to put his neck in a noose. If they really thought Brahms 4 was a senior KGB man, they'd be burying that Berlin system file now, not passing it around to get immediate action tags. They'd be preparing the excuses and half-truths they'd need to explain their incompetence. They'd be getting ready to stonewall the questions that come when the story hits the fan. I took the wine that Tessa had abandoned and added it to my own. And they don't have any worries about me either, or they wouldn't let me within a mile of the office while this was on the agenda. They've got to deal with you. Brahms 4 insists. I told you that. What they really think is that Brahms 4 is the best damned source they've had in the last decade. As usual, they only came to this conclusion when it looked like they were losing him. And what do you make of this ghastly business with Trent? I hesitated. I was guessing now. And I looked at her so that she knew this was just a guess. The approach to Trent might be a KGB effort to penetrate the department. My God, said Fiona in genuine alarm. A Russian move to access the Brahms 4 intelligence at this end. To find out where it's coming from. Brahms 4 is one of the best protected agents we have. And that's only because he did a deal with old Silas, and Silas stuck to his word. The only way they'd be able to trace him would be by seeing the material we're receiving in London. That's unthinkable, said Fiona. Why? I said. Because Giles could never get his hands on Brahms 4 material. That's all AAA. Even I have never seen it, and you only get the odds and ends you need to know. But the Russians might not know that Giles couldn't get hold of it. To them, he's senior enough to see anything he asks for. Fiona stared into my eyes, trying to see what was in my mind. Do you think that Brahms 4 might have got word of a KGB effort to trace him? Yes, I said. That's exactly what I think. Brahms 4's demand for retirement is just his way of negotiating for a complete change in the contact chain. It gets more and more frightening, said Fiona. I really don't think you should go there. This is not just a simple little day trip. This is a big operation with lots at stake for both sides. I can't think of anyone else they can send, I said. Fiona became suddenly angry. You bloody well want to go, she shouted. You're just like all the others. You miss it, don't you? You really like all that bloody macho business. I don't like it, I said. It was true, but she didn't believe me. I put my arms round her and pulled her close. Don't worry, I said. I'm too old and too frightened to do anything dangerous. You don't have to do anything dangerous in this business to get hurt. I didn't tell her that Werner had phoned me and asked me how soon I'd go back there. That would have complicated everything. I just told her I loved her, and that was the truth. Chapter 7. It was cold. Damned cold. When the hell would summer come? With my hands in my pockets and my collar turned up, I walked through Soho. It was early evening, but most of the shops were closed, their entrances piled high with garbage awaiting next morning's collection. It had become a desolate place, its charm long lost behind a pox of pawn shops and shabby little adult cinemas. I welcomed the smoky warmth of Carr's Club, and I welcomed the chance of one of the hot spiced rum drinks that were a speciality of the place no less than the chess. Carr's Club was not the sort of place that Tessa would have liked. It was below ground level in Gerrard Street, Soho, a basement that had provided storage space for a wine company before an incendiary bomb burned out the upper stories in one of the heavy German air raids of April 1941. It was 3 large interconnecting cellars with hardboard ceilings and noisy central heating, its old brickwork painted white to reflect the lights carefully placed over each table to illuminate the chessboards. Jan Carr was a Polish ex-serviceman who'd started his little club when, after coming out of the army at war's end, he realized he'd never return to his homeland again. By now, he was an old man with a great mop of fine white hair and a magnificent drinker's nose. Nowadays, his son Arkady was usually behind the counter, but the members were still largely Poles, with a selection of other East European émigrés. There was no one there I recognized, except 2 young champions in the second room whose game had already attracted half a dozen spectators. Less serious players, like me, kept to the room where the food and drink were dispensed. It was already half full. They were mostly elderly men with beards, dark-ringed eyes and large curly pipes. In the far corner under the clock, 2 silent men in ill-fitting suits glowered at their game and at each other. They played impatiently, taking every enemy in sight as children play draughts. I was seated in the corner position so that I could look up from the chessboard, my book of chess problems and my drink, to see everyone who entered as they signed the member's book. Giles Trent came in early. I studied him with new interest. He was younger looking than I remembered him. He took off his brown, narrow-brimmed felt hat in a quick, nervous gesture, like a schoolboy entering the headmaster's study. His grey, wavy hair was long enough to hide the tops of his ears. He was so tall that the club's low ceiling caused him to lower his head as he passed under the pink, tasselled lampshades. He put his riding mac on the bentwood hanger and ran his fingers through his hair as if it might have become disarranged. He was wearing a Glen Urquhart check suit of the sort favoured by wealthy bookmakers. It came complete with matching waistcoat and gold watch chain. "Hello, Carr," Trent said to the old man seated near the radiator, nursing his usual whiskey and water. Most of the members called him Carr. Only some of the older Poles who'd served with him in Italy knew that Carr was his family name. Trent stayed at the counter, where young Arkady dispensed cold snacks, the inimitable rum punch that his father was said to have invented under battle conditions in Italy. Good coffee, warm beer, iced vodka, poor advice about chess, and unpalatable tea. Trent took rum punch. "Mr. Klestakov hasn't been in tonight," the youth told Trent. Trent grunted and turned to look round the room. I stared down at my chess problem, By resting my chin in my hand, I was able to conceal my face from him. Trent's Russian arrived about 10 minutes later. He was wearing an expensive camel hair coat and handmade shoes. He only came up to Trent's shoulder, a pot-bellied man with big peasant hands and a jolly face. When he took his hat off, he revealed dark hair, brilliantined and carefully parted high in the crown of his head. He smiled when he saw Trent and slapped him on the shoulder, asked him how he was and called him Tovarich. I recognized the type. He was the sort of Soviet official who liked to show the happy, friendly side of life in the USSR. The kind of man who never arrived at a party without a couple of bottles of vodka and winked to let you know he was an incorrigible rogue who'd break any rule for the sake of friendship. Trent must have asked him what he wanted to drink. I heard the Russian say loudly, "Vodka. I only come here to drink my Polish friend's fine buffalo grass vodka." He spoke the smooth English that is the legacy of the teaching machine, but lacked the rhythms that can only come from hearing it spoken. They sat down at the table Trent had selected. The Russian drank several vodkas, laughed a lot at whatever Trent was telling him, and ate pickled herring with black bread. There was a chessboard and a box of well-worn chess pieces on every table. Trent opened the board and set up the chess pieces. He did it in the measured, preoccupied way that people do things when they are worrying about something else. The Russian gave no sign of being worried. He bit into his fish hungrily and chewed the bread with obvious delight. And every now and again he would call across the room to ask old Jan Carr what the weather forecast was, the rate of exchange for the dollar, or the result of some sporting fixture. Old Jan had been in a Russian prison camp from 1939, until he was released to go into General Anders' Polish Corps. He did not like Russians, and the answers he gave were polite but minimal. Trent's Russian companion gave no sign of recognizing this latent hostility. He smiled broadly at each answer and nodded sympathetically to acknowledge old Jan's flat-toned negative answers. I got up from my seat and went over to the counter to get another drink, coffee this time. And from there, keeping my back towards them, I was able to hear what Trent was saying. "Everything is slow," said Trent. "Everything takes time." "This is just a crazy idea that comes now into my head," said the Russian. "Take everything you have down to the photocopying shop in Baker Street, the same place you got the previous lot done." The Russian had spoken quite loudly, and although I didn't look round, I had the feeling that Trent had touched his sleeve in an effort to quieten him. Trent's voice was softer. "Leave it with me," he said. "Leave it with me." The words came in the anxious tones of someone who wants to change the subject. "Giles, my friend," said the Russian, his voice slurred as if by the effects of the vodka. "Of course I leave it with you." I took the coffee that Jan's son poured and went back to my table. This time I sat on another chair to keep my back turned to Trent and the Russian, but I could see them reflected faintly in a fly-specked portrait of General Pilsudski. I continued to work my way through one of the Capablanca's games against Alekhine in the 1927 championships, although I did not understand the half of it. By the time Capablanca won, Trent and the Russian had disappeared up the stairs and out into the street. "Can I join you, Bernard?" said old Jan Carr as I tipped my chess pieces into their box and folded my board. "I haven't seen you for years." "I'm married now, Jan," I said, "and I never was much of a chess player." "I heard about your dad. I'm sorry, he was a fine man." "It's a long time ago now," I said. He nodded. He offered me a drink, but I told him I would have to leave very soon. He looked round the room. It was empty. Everyone was in the room next door watching a game that had developed into a duel. "Working, are you? It was that Russian, wasn't it?" "What Russian?" I said. "Insolent bastard," said Jan Carr. "You'd think they wouldn't go where they're not welcome." "That would seriously limit their movements." "Ugh, I'll keep it to myself, of course, and so will my son." "I wish you would, Jan," I said. "It's very delicate, very delicate." "I hate Russians," said old Jan. Giles Trent's house was one of a terrace of narrow-fronted Georgian-style dwellings erected by speculative builders when the Great Exhibition of 1851 made Chelsea a respectable address for senior clerks and shopkeepers. Near the front door, panelled and black, with a brass lion's head knocker, stood Julian Mackenzie, a flippant youth who'd been with the department no more than 6 months. I'd chosen him to keep an eye on Trent because I knew he wouldn't dare ask me too many questions about it, or expect any paperwork. "He arrived home in a cab about half an hour ago," Mackenzie told me. "There's no one inside with him." "Lights?" "Just on the ground floor. And I think I saw some lights come on at the back. He probably went into the kitchen to make himself a cup of cocoa." "You can go off duty now," I told Mackenzie. "You wouldn't like me to come in with you?" "Who said I'm going in?" Mackenzie grinned. "Well, good luck, Bernie," he said cheerfully, and gave a mock salute. "When you've been with a department for nearly 20 years and the probationers are calling you Bernie," I said, "you start thinking that maybe you're not going to end up as Director General." "Sorry, sir," said Mackenzie. "No offence intended." "Buzz off," I said. I had to knock and ring 3 times before I could get Giles Trent to open the door to me. "What the devil is it?" he said, before the door was even half open. "Mr. Trent," I said deferentially. "What is it?" He looked at me as if I was a complete stranger to him. "It would be better if I came inside," I said. "It's not something we can talk about on the doorstep." No, it's midnight," he protested. "It's Bernard Samson, from operations," I said. Why the hell had I been worrying about Giles Trent recognising me in the club? Here I was on his doorstep and he was treating me like a vacuum cleaner salesman. "I work on the German desk with Dickie Cryer." I hoped that this revelation would bring about a drastic change of mood, but he just grunted and stood back, muttering something about being sure it could wait until morning. The narrow hall, with Regency-striped wallpaper and framed engravings by Dutch artists I'd never heard of, gave onto a narrow staircase, and through an open door I could see a well-equipped kitchen. The house was in a state of perfect order. No nicks in the paintwork, no scuffs on the wallpaper, no marks on the carpet. Everything was in that condition that is the mark of those who are rich, fastidious, and childless. The hall opened onto the divine living room that Tessa had promised. There was white carpet and white walls and gleaming white leather armchairs with brass buttons. There was even an almost colourless abstract painting over the white baby grand piano. I could not believe it was an example of Giles Trent's taste. It was the sort of interior that is designed at great expense by energetic divorcees who don't take cheques. "It had better be important," said Trent. He was staring at me. He didn't offer me a drink. He didn't even invite me to sit down. Perhaps my sort of trench coat didn't look good on white. "It is important," I said. Trent had taken off the tie he'd been wearing at Carr's club, and now wore a silk scarf inside his open shirt. He'd replaced his jacket with a cashmere cardigan and his shoes with a pair of grey velvet slippers. I wondered if he always dressed with such trouble between coming home and going to bed, or whether his informal attire accounted for the delay before he opened the door to me. Or was he expecting a visit from Tessa? "Oh, I remember you now," he said suddenly. "You're the one who married Fiona Kimber Hutchinson." "Were you at Carr's club tonight?" I said. "Yes. Talking to a member of the Russian embassy staff." "It's a chess club," said Trent. He went across to the chair where he'd been sitting, placed a marker in a paperback of Zola's Germinal, and put it on the shelf, along with hardback copies of Agatha Christie and other detective stories. "I speak to many people there. I play chess with anyone available. I don't know what they do for a living." "The man you were with is described in the diplomatic list as first secretary, but I think he's a KGB man, don't you?" "I didn't think about it one way or the other." "Didn't you?" You didn't think about it. Okay, if I quote you on that one. Don't threaten me, said Trent. He opened a silver box on the table where the book had been and took a cigarette and lit it, blowing smoke in a gesture that might have been repressed anger. I'm senior in rank and service to you, Mr. Samson. Don't come into my home trying the bully boy tactics that work so well with other people of your own sort. You can't believe that being senior in service and rank gives you the unquestioned right to have regular meetings with KGB agents and discuss the merits of various photocopying services. Trent went red in the face. He turned away from me, but that, of course, only drew attention to his discomfiture. Photocopying? What the hell are you talking about? I hope you're not going to say that you were only going to photocopy chess problems, or that you were meeting that KGB man on the orders of the DG, or that you were engaged on a secret assignment for a person whose name you are not permitted to tell me. Trent turned and came towards me. All I'm going to tell you, he said, tapping my chest with his finger, is to leave my house right away. Any further conversation will be done through my lawyer. I wouldn't advise you to consult a lawyer, I said, in the friendliest tone I could manage. Get out, he said. Aren't you going to tell me that you'll make sure I'm fired from the department? I said. Get out, he said again. And you tell whoever sent you that I intend to take legal action to safeguard my rights. You've got no rights, I said. You sign the Act regularly. Have you ever bothered to read what it says on that piece of paper? It certainly doesn't say that I'm not entitled to consult a lawyer when I have some little upstart force his way into my house and accuse me of treason or whatever it is you're accusing me of. I'm not accusing you of anything, Trent. I'm just asking you some simple questions to which you are supplying very complicated answers. If you start dragging lawyers into this dialogue, our masters are going to regard it as a very unfriendly reaction. They are going to see it as a confrontation, Trent, and it's the sort of confrontation you can't win. I'll win. Grow up, Trent. Even if you went to law and did the impossible and got a verdict against the Crown so that you were awarded damages and costs, do you think they'd ever give you your job back? And where would you go to find another job? No, Trent. You've got to put up with being quizzed by menials like me because it's all part of the job. Your job. Your one and only job. Wait a minute. There are a couple of things I want to get straight, he said. Who says I've been in regular contact with this Russian diplomat? We've got this funny system in interrogation. You wrote one of the training books, so you'll know about this. That it's the interrogator that asks the questions, and the man being investigated that answers them. Am I being investigated? Yes, you are, I said. And I think you are as guilty as hell. I think you're an agent working for the Russians. Trent touched the silk scarf at his neck, loosening it with his fingers as if he was too hot. He was frightened now. Frightened in the way that such a man could never be by physical violence. Trent enjoyed physical exertion, discomfort, and even hardship. He'd learned to deal with such things at his public school. He was frightened of something quite different. He was terrified that damage was going to be done to the grand, illusory image that he had of himself. It was part of my job to guess what frightened a man, and then not to dwell on it, but rather let him pick at it himself while I talked of other tedious things, giving him plenty of opportunity to peel back the scab of fear and expose the tender wound beneath. So I didn't tell Trent about the misery and disgrace that would be waiting for him. Instead, I told him how simple it would be for me to drop this investigation and destroy my notes and papers, in exchange for having him walking into my office the next morning and making a voluntary statement. In that way, there would be no investigation. Trent would report an overture made to him from a Russian diplomat, and we would brief him on how to react. And would the department allow that? Would they agree to it being something that starts from a report from me? There was, of course, no report to change or destroy. I hadn't mentioned my conversation with Tessa to anyone at all. I nodded sagely. Use your imagination, Trent. What do you think the DG would prefer? If we discover you in contact with the Russians, we've got a disaster on our hands. But if you can be described as one of our people feeding stuff to the Russians, we've got a minor triumph. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Of course I'm right. I know how these things work. You'd want me to continue my meetings with him. Exactly. You'd be working for us. You'd be making a fool of him. Trent smiled. He liked that. After I'd been through my piece a couple of times, Trent became friendly enough to press a couple of drinks on me and thank me for my kindness and consideration. He repeated my instructions earnestly and thankfully, and he looked up to wait for my nod of approval. For by now, in about an hour of conversation, I had established the role of father confessor, protector, and perhaps saviour too. That's right, I said, this time letting the merest trace of warmth into my voice. You do it our way, and you'll be fine. Everything will be fine. This could even mean a step up the promotion ladder for you. Chapter 8. What wife, at some time or other, has not suspected her husband of infidelity? And how many husbands have not felt a pang of uncertainty at some unexplained absence, some careless remark or late arrival of his spouse? There was nothing definite in my fears. There was nothing more than confused suspicions. Fiona's embraces were as lusty as ever. She laughed at my jokes, and her eyes were bright when she looked at me. Too bright, perhaps, for sometimes I thought I could detect in her that profound compassion that women show only for men who have lost them. I'd been trying to read other people's minds for most of my life. It could be a dangerous task. Just as a physician might succumb to hypochondria, a policeman to graft, or a priest to materialism, so I knew that I studied too closely the behaviour of those close to me. Suspicion went with the job, the endemic disease of the spy. For friendships and for marriages, it sometimes proved fatal. I'd returned home very late after my visit to Giles Trent, and that night I slept heavily. By 7 o'clock next morning, Fiona's place alongside me in bed was empty. Balanced upon the clock radio, there was buttered toast and a cup of coffee, by now quite cold. She must have left very early. In the kitchen, I could hear the children and their young nanny. I looked in on them and took some orange juice while standing up. I tried to join in the game they were playing, but they yelled derision at my efforts, for I'd not understood that all answers must be given in Red Indian dialect. I blew them kisses that they didn't acknowledge and, wrapped into my sheepskin car coat, went down into the street to spend 15 minutes getting the car to start. Sleet was falling as I reached the worst traffic jams, and Dickie Cryer had parked his big Jag carelessly enough to make it a tight squeeze to get into my allotted space in the underground garage. Don't complain, Samson. You're lucky to have a space at all. Dickie, not having fully mastered the technique of steering, really needs two. I spent half an hour on the phone asking when my new car was going to be delivered, but got no clear answer beyond the fact that delivery dates were unreliable. I looked at the clock and decided to call Fiona's extension. Her secretary said, "Mrs. Samson had an out-of-town meeting this morning." "Oh, yes, she mentioned it, I think," I said. Her secretary knew I was trying to save face. Secretaries always guess right about that kind of thing. Her voice became especially friendly, as if to compensate for Fiona's oversight. "Mrs. Samson said she'd be late back, but she'll phone me sometime this morning for messages. She always does that. I'll tell her you called. Was there any message, Mr. Samson?" Was her secretary a party to whatever was going on, I wondered? Was it one of those affairs that women like to discuss very seriously, or was it recounted with laughter, as Fiona had recounted to me some of her teenage romances? Or was Fiona the sort of delinquent wife who confided in no one? That would be her style, I decided. No one would ever own Fiona. She was fond of saying that, There was always a part of her that was kept secret from all the world. "Can I give your wife a message, Mr. Samson?" her secretary asked again. "No," I said. "Just tell her I called." Brett Rensselaer liked to describe himself as a workaholic. That this description was a tired old cliché didn't deter him from using it. He liked clichés. They were, he said, the best way to get simple ideas into the heads of idiots. But his description of himself was accurate enough. He liked work. He'd inherited a house in the Virgin Islands and a portfolio of stock that would keep him idling in the sun for the rest of his days, if that was his inclination. But he was always at his desk by 8:30 and had never been known to have a day off for sickness. A day off for other reasons was not unusual. Easter at Le Touquet, Whitsun at Deauville, the Royal Enclosure in June, and the Dublin Horse Show in August were appointments marked in red pencil on Brett's year planner. Needless to say, Rensselaer had never served as a field agent. His only service experience was a couple of years in the US Navy, in the days when his father was still hoping he'd take over the family-owned bank. Brett had spent his life in swivel chairs, arguing with dictating machines and smiling for committees. His muscles had come from lifting barbells and jogging around the lawn of his Thameside mansion. And one look at him would suggest that it was a good way to get them, for Brett had grown old gracefully. His face was tanned in that very even way that comes from sun reflected off the pulverschnee that only falls on very expensive ski resorts. His fair hair was changing almost imperceptibly to white, and the eyeglasses that he now required for reading were styled like those that California highway patrolmen hang in their pocket flap while writing you a ticket. "Bad news, Brett," I told him as soon as he could fit me into his schedule. "Giles Trent is coming in this morning to tell us just what he's been spilling to the Russians." Brett didn't jump up and start doing press-ups, as he was said to have done when Dickie brought him the news that his wife had walked out on him. "Tell me more," he said, calmly. I told him about my visit to Carr's Club and overhearing the conversation, and that I'd suggested that Trent report it all to us. I didn't say why I'd visited Carr's Club or mention anything about Tessa. He listened to my story without interrupting me, but he got to his feet and spent a little time checking through his paperclip collection while he listened. 3 Russians. Where were the other 2? Sitting in the corner, playing chess with 2 fingers and saying nothing to anyone. Sure they were part of it? A KGB hit team, I said. They weren't difficult to spot. Cheap Moscow suits and square-toed shoes, sitting silent because their English isn't good enough for anything more than buying a cup of coffee. They were there in case the flashy one needed them. They work in 3s. Is there a Kolesnikov on the diplomatic list? No. I invented that part of the story for Trent. But this one was a KGB man. Expensive clothes, but no rings. Did you ever notice the way those KGB people never buy rings in the West? Rings leave marks on the fingers that might have to be explained when they're called back home, you see. But you said that in the club members' book they are all described as Hungarians. Are you sure they're Russians? They didn't do a Cossack dance or play balalaikas, I said, but that's only because they didn't think of it. This fat little guy, Klestikov, a phony name, of course, was calling Trent Tovarish. Tovarish? Jesus! I haven't heard anyone say that since the TV reruns of those old Garbo films. Brett Rensselaer took off his eyeglasses and fiddled with them. The Russian guy said, this is just a crazy idea that comes into my head, take everything down to the photocopying shop in Baker Street. I finished it for him. The same place you got the previous lot done. Yes, that's what he said, Brett. He must be crazy, saying that in a place where he could be overheard. That's it, Brett, I said, trying not to be too sarcastic. Like the man said, he's a KGB man who acts upon a crazy idea as soon as it comes into his head. Brett was toying with his spectacles as if encountering the technology of the hinge for the first time. What's eating you? He said, without looking up at me. Come on, Brett, I said. Did you ever hear of a Russian making a snap decision about anything? Did you ever hear of a KGB man acting on a crazy idea that just came into his head? Brett smiled uneasily but didn't answer. All the KGB people I ever encountered have certain well-ingrained Russian characteristics, Brett. They are very slow, very devious, and very, very thorough. Brett put his wire-frame glasses into their case and leaned back to take a good look at me. You want to tell me what the hell you're getting at? They did everything except sing the Internationale, Brett, I said. And it wasn't Trent who did anything indiscreet. He played it close to the chest. It was the KGB man who came on like he was auditioning for Chekhov. You're not telling me that these guys were just pretending to be Russians? No, I said. My imagination doesn't stretch to the idea of anybody who is not Russian wishing to be mistaken for a Russian. So you think these guys staged the whole thing for your benefit? You think they just did it to discredit Giles Trent? I didn't answer. So why the hell would Giles Trent confess when you confronted him? Said Brett, rubbing salt into it. I don't know, I admitted. Just 4 beats to the bar, feller, okay? Don't get too complicated. Save all that for coordination. Those guys get paid to fit the loose ends together. Sure, I said. But meanwhile, we'd better send someone along to turn Trent's place over. Not just a quick glance under the bed and a flashlight to see around the attic. A proper search. Agreed. Tell my secretary to do the paperwork, and I'll get it signed. Meanwhile, assign someone to it, someone you can rely on. And, by the way, Bernard, it's beginning to look as though we might have to ask you to go to Berlin after all. I'm not sure I could do that, Brett, I said, with matching charm. It's your decision, he said, and smiled to show how friendly he could be. Most of the time, he was Mr. Nice Guy. He opened doors for you, stood back to let you into the lift, laughed at your jokes, agreed with your conclusions, and asked your advice. But when all the pleasantries were over, he made sure you did exactly what he wanted. I was still thinking about Brett Rensselaer when I finished work that evening. He was different from any of the other department heads I had to deal with. Despite those moments of brash hostility, he was more approachable than the DG and more reliable than Dickie Cryer. And Brett had that sort of laid-back self-confidence that you have to be both rich and American to possess. He was the only one to defy the departmental tradition that only the DG could have a really big car. While the rest of the senior staff managed with Jaguars, Mercedes and Volvos, Brett had a bloody great Bentley limousine and a full-time uniformed chauffeur to go with it. I saw Brett's gleaming black Bentley in the garage when I got out of the lift in the basement. The interior lights were on, and I could hear Mozart from the stereo. Brett's driver was sitting in the back seat, tapping his cigarette ash into a paper bag and swaying in time to the music. The driver, Albert Bingham, was a 60-year-old ex-Scots Guardsman whose enforced silence while driving resulted in a compulsive garrulity when off duty. "Hello, Mr. Samson," he called out to me. "Am I parked in the way?" "No," I said. But Albert was out of his car and all ready for one of his chats. "I wondered if you'd be taking your wife's car," he said. "But on the other hand, I guessed she'd be coming back here to collect it herself. I know how much she likes driving that Porsche, Mr. Samson. We were having a chat about it only last week. I told her I could have it tuned up by a fellow I know at the place where I get the Bentley serviced. He's a wizard, and he has a Porsche himself. Second-hand one, of course, not the latest model like that one of your wife's." "I'm going home in this elderly Ford," I said, tapping the glass of it with my keys. "I hear you're getting a Volvo," he said. "Just the right car for a family man." "We're too squeezed in my wife's Porsche," I said. "You'll be pleased with the Volvo," said Albert, in that tone of voice that marks the Bentley driver. "It's a solid car, as good as the Mercedes any day, and you can quote me on that." "I might quote you on that," I said, "if I ever tried trading it in for a Mercedes." Albert smiled and took a puff at his cigarette. He knew when he was being joshed, and he knew how to show me he didn't mind. "Your wife wanted to drive Mr. Rensselaer in her Porsche, but he insisted on the Bentley. He doesn't like fast sports cars, Mr. Rensselaer. He likes to be able to stretch his legs out. He was injured in the war. Did you know he was injured?" I wondered what Albert could be talking about. Fiona had arranged to go to Tessa's and sort through some house agents' offers. "Injured? I didn't know. He was in submarines. He broke his kneecap falling down a companionway. That's a sort of ladder on a ship, and it was reset while they were at sea. A sub doesn't return from patrol for a little matter of an ensign hurting his leg." Albert laughed at the irony of it all. Where had Rensselaer gone with my wife? "So you nearly got an evening off, Albert?" Gratified to see I hadn't climbed into the driving seat and fled from him, as most of the staff did when he started chatting, Albert took a deep breath and said, "I don't mind, Mr. Samson. I can use the overtime to tell you the honest truth. And what do I care if I'm sitting at home in my poky little bed-sitter, or lying back in that real leather? It's Mozart, Mr. Samson, and I'd just as soon listen to Mozart here in an underground garage as anywhere in the world. That stereo is a beautiful job. Come over and listen to it if you don't believe me." They couldn't have gone far, or Albert would not have brought the Bentley back to the garage to wait for them. "Much traffic in town tonight, Albert? I have to go through the West End." "Och, it's terrible, Mr. Samson. One of these days, it's going to lock up solid." This was one of Albert's standard phrases. He said it automatically while he worked out an answer to my question. "Piccadilly is bad at this time. It's the theatres. I never know how to avoid Piccadilly when I'm going home." Albert inhaled on his cigarette. I had given him the perfect opening on his favourite topic, shortcuts in central London. "Well, take your journey tonight," I interrupted him. "How did you tackle it? You knew there'd be heavy traffic. When did you leave? 7? 7:15. Well, they went for a drink in the White Elephant Club in Curzon Street first. They could have walked from there to the Connaught, I know, but it might have started to rain and there'd be no cabs in Curzon Street at that time. The table at the Connaught Hotel grill room was for 8 o'clock. No place for a big car like mine in Curzon Street. They double park there by 7 on some evenings at this time of year. I got there via Birdcage Walk, past Buckingham Palace and Hyde Park Corner. A long way round, you say, but when you've spent as many years driving in London as I have, I let Albert's voice drone on, as I asked myself why my wife told me she was spending the evening with Tessa when really she was having dinner in a hotel with Brett Rensselaer. "Is that the time?" I said, looking at my watch while Albert was in full flow. "I must go. Nice talking to you, Albert. You're a mine of information." Albert smiled. I could still hear cosy fan tutti from the Bentley stereo when I was driving up the exit ramp. I watched her as she took off her rain-specked headscarf. She wore a silk square only when she wanted to protect a very special new hairdo. She shook her head and flicked at her hair with her fingertips. Her eyes sparkled, and her skin was pale and perfect. She smiled. How beautiful she seemed, and how far away. "Did you eat out?" she said. She noticed the dining table with the unused place setting that Mrs. Diaz had left for me. "I had a cheese roll in a pub." "Oh, that's the worst thing you could choose," she said. "Fat and carbohydrates. That's not good for you. There was cold chicken and salad prepared." "So did Tessa find another house?" Alerted perhaps by the tone of voice or by the way I stood facing her, she looked into my face for a moment before taking off her raincoat. I couldn't get to Tessa's tonight. Something came up." She shook the raincoat and the raindrops flashed in the light. "Work, you mean?" She looked at me steadily before nodding. We had a tacit agreement not to ask questions about work. "Something Rensselaer wanted," she said, and kept looking at me as if challenging me to pursue it. "I saw your car in the car park when I left, but security said you'd already gone." She walked past me to hang her coat in the hall. When she'd done that, she looked in the hall mirror and combed her hair as she spoke. "There was a lot of stuff in the diplomatic bag this afternoon. Some of it needed translation, and Brett's secretary has only A-level German. I went over the road and worked there." Claiming to be in the Foreign Office as an explanation of absence was the oldest joke in the department. No one could ever be found in that dark labyrinth. "You had dinner with Rensselaer," I said, unable to control my anger any longer. She stopped combing her hair, opened her handbag, and dropped the comb into it. Then she smiled and said, "Well, you don't expect me to starve, darling, do you?" "Don't give me all that crap," I said. "You left the building with Rensselaer at 7:15. You were in his Bentley when he drove out of the garage. Then I discovered he'd left the reception desk at the Connaught as his contact number for the night duty officer. "You haven't lost your touch, darling," she said, with ice in every syllable. "Once a field man, always a field man. Isn't that what they say? It's what people like Cryer and Rensselaer say. It's what people say when they are trying to put down the people who do the real work." "Well, now it's paid off for you," she said. "Now all your old expertise has enabled you to discover that I had dinner at the Connaught with Brett Rensselaer. So why do you have to lie to me?" "What lies?" "I told you I had to do some work for Rensselaer. We had dinner, a good dinner, with wine, but we were talking shop. About what?" She pushed past me into the front room, and through into the dining room that opened from it in what designers call open plan. She picked up the clean plates and cutlery that had been left for me. "You know better than to ask me that." She went into the kitchen. I followed her as she put the plates on a shelf in the dresser. "Because it's so secret? It's confidential," she said. "Don't you have work that is too confidential to talk to me about? Not in the grill room of the Connaught, I don't." "So, you even know which room we were in. You've done your homework tonight, haven't you? What was I supposed to do while you're having dinner with the boss? Am I supposed to eat cold chicken and watch TV? You were supposed to be having a beer with a friend and then collecting the children from their visit to my parents' house." Oh, my God. I forgot. I clean forgot about the children, I admitted. "I phoned Mother. I guessed you'd forget. She gave them supper and brought them here in a minicab. It's all right." "Good old mum-in-law," I said. "You don't have to be bloody sarcastic about my mother," said Fiona. "It's bad enough trying to have an argument about Brett." "Let's drop it," I said. "Do what you like," said Fiona. "I've had enough talk for one night." She switched off the light in the dining room, then opened the door of the dishwasher, closed it again, and turned it on. The sprays of the dishwasher beat on its steel interior like a Wagnerian drum roll. The noise made conversation impossible. When I came from the bathroom, I expected to see Fiona tucked into the pillow and feigning sleep. She did that sometimes after we'd had a row. But this time, she was sitting up in bed, reading some large tome with the distinctive cheap binding of the department's library. She wanted to remind me that she was a dedicated wage slave. As I undressed, I tried a fresh, friendly tone of voice. "What did Brett want?" "I wish you wouldn't keep on about it." "There's nothing between you, is there?" She laughed. It was a derisory laugh. "You suspect me? With Brett Rensselaer? He's nearly as old as my father." "He was probably older than the father of that cipher clerk, Jenny something, who left just before Christmas." Fiona raised her eyes from her book. This was the sort of thing that interested her. "You don't think she... With Brett, you mean?" "Internal Security sent someone to find out why she'd left without giving proper notice. She said she'd been having an affair with Brett. He told her they were through." "Good grief," said Fiona. "Poor Brett. I suppose the DG had to be told." "The DG was pleased to hear the girl had proper security clearance, and that was that." How broad-minded of the old man. I'd have thought he would have been furious. Still, Brett isn't married. His wife left him, didn't she? The suggestion was that Brett had sinned before. And always with someone with proper security clearance. Well, good for Brett. "So that's why you thought." She laughed again. It was a genuine laugh this time. She closed her book but kept a finger in the page. "He's going through the regular routine about the danger of security lapses." "I told him about Giles Trent," I said. "I kept Tessa out of it." "Brett has decided to talk to everyone personally," said Fiona. "Surely Brett doesn't suspect you?" Fiona smiled. "No, darling. Brett didn't take me to the Connaught to interrogate me over the bones of the last of his season's woodcock. He spent the evening talking about you. About me. And in due course of time, he will take you aside and ask about me. You know how it works, darling. You've been at this business longer than I have." She put a marker in her book before laying it aside. "Oh, for Christ's sake." If you don't believe me, darling, ask Brett. I might do that, I said. She waited until I got into bed and then switched out the lights. I thought there was protein in cheese, I said. She didn't answer. Chapter 9. Dickie Cryer was in Brett Rensselaer's office when they sent for me on Wednesday. Cryer had his thumbs stuck in the back pockets of his jeans, and his curly head was tilted to one side as if he were listening for some distant sound. Rensselaer was in his swivel chair, arms folded and feet resting on a leather stool. These relaxed postures were studied, and I guessed that the two of them had taken up their positions when they heard me at the door. It was a bad sign. Rensselaer's folded arms and Cryer's akimbo stance had that sort of aggression I'd seen in interrogating teams. "Bernard," said Dickie Cryer, in a tone of pleasant surprise, as if I'd just dropped in for tea, rather than kept them waiting for 30 minutes in response to the third of his calls. Rensselaer watched us dispassionately, like a passing taxicab passenger might watch two men at a bus stop. "Looks like another jaunt to Big B," said Dickie. "Is that so?" I said, without enthusiasm. Brett was jacketless. This slim figure in white shirt, bow tie and waistcoat looked like the sort of Mississippi riverboat gambler who broke into song for the final reel. "Not through the wire or anything tricky," said Dickie. "Just a call into our office. An East German has just knocked on Frank Harrington's door with a bag full of paper and demands to be sent to London. Won't talk to our Berlin people, Frank tells me." Dickie Cryer ran his finger through his curls before nodding seriously at Rensselaer. "Another crank," I said. "Is that what you think, Bernard?" said Rensselaer, with that earnest sincerity I'd learned to disregard. "What kind of papers?" I asked Dickie. "Right," said Cryer. But he didn't answer my question. Rensselaer took his time about describing the papers. "Interesting stuff," he stated, cautiously. "Most of it from here. The minutes of a meeting the DG had with some Foreign Office senior staff, an appraisal of our success in tapping diplomatic lines out of London, part of a report on our use of US enciphering machines. A mixed bag, but it's worth attention. Right?" "Well worth our attention, Brett," I said. "What's that supposed to mean?" said Cryer. "For anyone who believes in Santa Claus," I added. "You mean it's a KGB stunt?" said Rensselaer. "Yes, that's probably it." Cryer looked at him, disconcerted by his change of attitude. "On the other hand," said Rensselaer, "it's something we ignore at our peril. Wouldn't you agree, Bernard?" I didn't answer. Dickie Cryer moved his hands to grip the large brass buckle of his leather cowboy belt. "Berlin resident is worried. Damned worried." "Old Frank is always worried," I said. "He can be an old woman, we all know that." "Frank's had a lot to worry about since he took over," said Rensselaer, to put his loyalty to his subordinates on record. But he didn't deny that Frank Harrington, our senior man in Berlin, could be an old woman. "All stuff from here," I said. "Identifiably from here, verbatim, copies of our documents. From here, how?" "It's no good asking Frank that," said Dickie Cryer quickly before anyone blamed him for not finding out. "It's no good asking Frank anything," I said. "So why doesn't he send everything over here?" "I wouldn't want that," said Rensselaer, his arms still crossed, his eyes staring at the who's who on his bookshelf. "If this is just the KGB trying to stir a little trouble for us, I don't want to get their man over here for interrogation. It would give them something to gloat over. Given that sort of encouragement, they'll try again and again. No, we'll take it easy. We'll have Bernard go over there and sort through this stuff and talk to their guy and tell us what he thinks. But let's not overreact." He snapped a desk drawer shut with enough force to make a sound like a pistol shot. "It will be a waste of time," I said. Brett Rensselaer kicked his foot to swivel his chair and faced me. He uncrossed his arms for a moment, snapped his starched cuffs at me, and smiled. "That's exactly the way I want it handled, Bernard. You go and look it over with that jaundiced eye of yours. No good sending Dickie." He looked at Dickie and smiled. He'd wind up talking to the DG on the hotline. Dickie Cryer thrust his hands deep into the pockets of his jeans, scowled, and hunched his shoulders. He didn't like Rensselaer saying he was excitable. Cryer wanted to be a cool and imperturbable sort of whiz-kid. Rensselaer looked at me and smiled. He knew he'd upset Cryer, and he wanted me to share the fun. "Go through the Berlin telex and make a note of what references they quote. Then go and see the originals, read through the minutes of that meeting at the FO, and dig out that memo about the cipher machines and so on. That way you'll be able to judge for yourself when you get there." He glanced at Dickie, who was looking out of the window, sulking, and then at me. "Whatever conclusion you come to, you'll tell Frank Harrington it's Spielzug. Garbage." "Of course," I said. "Take tomorrow's RAF flight, and have a chat with Frank and calm him down. See this little German guy and sort through this junk he's peddling." "Okay," I said. I knew Brett would find a way of getting me to what Dickie called Big B. "And what's the score with Giles Trent?" I asked. "He's been taken care of, Bernard," said Rensselaer. "We'll talk about it when you return." He smiled. He was handsome, and could turn on the charm like a film star. Of course Fiona could fall for him. I felt like spitting in his eye. I caught the military flight to Berlin the next day. The plane was empty, except for me, 2 medical orderlies who'd brought a sick soldier over the day before, and a brigadier with an amazing amount of baggage. The brigadier borrowed my newspaper and wanted to talk about fly fishing. He was an affable man, young-looking compared to most brigadiers I'd ever met, but that was not much of a sampling. It wasn't his fault that he bore a superficial resemblance to my father-in-law, but I found it a definite barrier. I put my seat into the recline position and mumbled something about having had a late night. Then I stared out the window until thin wisps of cloud like paint-starved brushstrokes defaced the hard, regular patterns of agricultural land that was unmistakably German. The brigadier began chatting to one of the medical orderlies. He asked him how long he'd been in the army, and if he had a family and where they lived. The private replied in an abrupt way that should have been enough to indicate that he'd prefer to talk football with his chum. But the brigadier droned on. His voice, too, was like that of Fiona's father. He even had the same little with which Fiona's father finished each piece of reckless bigotry. I remembered the first time I met Fiona's parents. They'd invited me to stay the weekend. They had a huge mansion of uncertain age near Leith Hill in Surrey. The house was surrounded by trees, straggly firs and pines for the most part. Around the house there were tree-covered hillsides, so that Fiona's father, David Timothy Kimberley Hutchinson, Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, wealthy businessman and farm owner and prize-winning amateur watercolour painter, could proudly say that he owned all the land seen from the window of his study. There is surely a lack of natural human compassion in a host who clears away Sunday breakfast at 10:30. Fiona's father did not think so. "I've been up helping to feed the horses since 6:30 this morning. I was exercising my best hunter before breakfast." He was wearing riding breeches, polished boots, yellow cashmere roll neck, and a checked hacking jacket that fitted his slightly plump figure to perfection. I noticed his attire because he'd caught me in the breakfast room getting the last dry scrapings of scrambled egg from a dish on the electric hot plate, while I was barefoot and clad in an ancient dressing gown and pyjamas. "You're not thinking of taking that plate of oddments?" He came closer to see the 2 shriveled rashers and 4 wrinkled mushrooms that were under the flakes of egg. "Up to the bedroom?" "As a matter of fact, I am," I told him. No. He said it with the sort of finality that doubtless ended all boardroom discussion. "My good wife will never have food in the bedrooms." Plate in hand, I continued to the door. "I'm not taking it up there for your wife," I said. "It's for me." That very early encounter with Mr. Kimber Hutchinson blighted any filial bond that might otherwise have blossomed. But at this time the idea of marrying Fiona had not formed in my mind, and the prospect of seeing Mr. David Kimber Hutchinson ever again seemed mercifully remote. "My God, man! You've not even shaved!" he shouted after me as I went upstairs with my breakfast. "You provoke him," Fiona said when I told her about my encounter. She was in my bed, having put on her frilly nightdress, waiting to share the booty from the breakfast table. "How can you say that?" I argued. "I speak only when he speaks to me, and then only to make polite conversation. You hypocrite! You know very well that you deliberately provoke him. You ask him all those wide-eyed, innocent questions about making profits from cheap labour, only because he keeps saying he's a socialist," I said. "And don't take that second piece of bacon, one each." "You beast! You know I hate mushrooms." She licked her fingers. "You're no better, darling. What do you ever do that makes you more of a socialist than Daddy?" "I'm not a socialist," I said. "I'm a fascist. I keep telling you that, but you never listen." "Daddy has his own sort of socialist ideas," said Fiona. "He refuses to do business with the French, loathes the Americans, never employs Jews, thinks all Arabs are crooked, and the only Russian he likes is Tchaikovsky. Where is the brotherhood of man?" "A lot of that tirade was directed at me," said Fiona. "Daddy's been angry ever since I got a reference from old Silas Gaunt. That's Mother's side of the family, and Daddy's feuding with them." "I see. When I hear my father going on as he did last night at dinner, I feel like joining the Communist Party, don't you?" "No, I feel like suggesting your father join it." "No, seriously, darling. The Communist Party? You know what I mean. Workers of the world unite and all that. Daddy pays lip service to the idea of socialism, but he never does anything about it." "You wouldn't escape him by joining the CP," I said. "Your father would write out a cheque and buy it, and then he'd sell off its sports field as office sites." "Come back to bed," said Fiona. "Now that we've missed breakfast, there's nothing to get up for." Fiona rarely mentioned her father's politics, and was vague about her own beliefs. Political conversation at the dinner table usually had her staring vacantly into space, or prompted her to start a conversation about children or sewing or hairdressers. Sometimes I wondered if she was really interested in her job in the department, or if she just stayed there to keep an eye on me. "Oh, we're about to land, old boy," said the brigadier. "Make sure your seatbelt is fastened, The plane was over Berlin now. I could see the jagged shape of the wall as the pilot turned onto finals for the approach to RAF Gatow, the one-time Luftwaffe training college. Its runway ends abruptly at the wall, except that here the wall is a wire mesh fence and a sandy patch that intelligence reports say has been left without mines and obstacles in case the day should come when units of the adjoining Russian Army's tank depot would roll through it to take Berlin-Gatow, with its runways intact and electronics undamaged. Chapter 10. Did you ever say hello to a girl you almost married long ago? Did she smile the same captivating smile, and give your arm a hug in a gesture you'd almost forgotten? Did the wrinkles as she smiled make you wonder what marvellous times you'd missed? That's how I felt about Berlin every time I came back here. Liesl Hennig's hotel, just off Kantstrasse in the western sector, was unchanged. No one had tried to repair or repaint the facade pock-marked by Red Army shell splinters in 1945. The imposing doorway, alongside an optician's shop, opened onto the same grandiose marble staircase. The patched carpet, its red now a faded brown, led up to the salon where Liesl was always to be found. Liesl's mother had chosen the heavy oak furniture from Wertheim's department store at Alexanderplatz in the days before Hitler, and long before the grand old house became this shabby hotel. "Hello, darling," said Liesl, as though I'd seen her only yesterday. She was old, a huge woman who overflowed from the armchair, her red silk dress emphasizing every bulge, so that she looked like molten lava pouring down a steep hillside. "You look tired, darling. You're working too hard." There had been few changes made in this salon since Liesl was a child in a house with 5 servants. There were photos on every side. sepia family groups in ebony frames, faded celebrities of the 30s, actresses with long cigarette holders, writers under big-brimmed hats, glossy film stars from the UFA studios, carefully retouched prima donnas of the State Opera, artists of the Dada movement, trapeze performers from the Wintergarten, and nightclub singers from long-vanished clip joints. All of them signed with the sort of florid guarantees of enduring love that are the ephemera of show business. Liesel's late husband was there, dressed in the white tie outfit he wore to play Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto with the Berlin Philharmonic the night the Führer was in the audience. There were no photos of the bent little cripple who ended his days playing for Trinkgeld in a broken-down bar in Rankerstrasse. Some of these photos were of family friends, those who came to Liesel's salon in the 30s and the 40s when it was a place to meet the rich and famous, and those who came in the 50s to meet men with tinned food and work permits. There were modern pictures, too, of long-term residents who endured the trials and tribulations, uncertain hot water, and the noise of the central heating, and the phone messages that were forgotten, and letters that were never delivered, and the bathroom lights that did not work. Such loyal clients were invited into Liesel's cramped little office for a glass of sherry when they settled the bill, and their photos were enshrined there over the cash box. "You look terrible, darling," she said. "I'm fine, Tante Liesel," I said. "Can you find a room for me?" She switched on another light. A large plant in an Art Nouveau pot cast a sudden spiky shadow on the ugly brown wallpaper. She turned to see me better, and part of her pearl necklace disappeared into a roll of fatty muscle. "There will always be a room for you, Liebchen. Give me a kiss." But I had already leaned over to give her a kiss. It was a necessary ritual. She had been calling me Liebchen and demanding kisses since before I could walk. "So, nothing changes, Liesel," I said. "Nothing changes. Everything changes."